call the July 22nd Planning Board meeting to order. I ask for a motion to move approval of the July 8th minutes to the end of the meeting.
So,
All right, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we're going to go back to the hearing for 114 West Road. Regional impact notices went out. I think you have a copy of, there was a letter from the Regional Planning Commission and School District. We did the site walk at 6 o'clock, so I think at this point, applicants, we're happy to hear your presentation of the proposed subdivision. I expect at some part of that we can address the version of the ordinance. We have the letter from your attorney, and then we'll have some questions from the board. We'll open it to all members of the public. I'll also note for the record, Rich Marcoux is on through Zoom, as well as some other members of the public. Just one board member. So we have full 7 at this moment. I don't know if Sam's starting or
Again, for the record, Eli Lano from Bernstein Sure. I didn't see the regional planning letter yet. Was there?
There's an extra.
I printed out some. I
think there's 2 or 2 in there, but I had an extra one in my seat. So thank you.
All right, so for the record, Sam Poise with Marine Land Services. I have Keith and Stacey to my right, as well as Eli. Keith is the owner and the applicant of this application, and then actually Eli and Tim are Keith's legal counsels related to this application. I'm sure we're all aware of what this property is and where it's located, but just to make sure that we're all clear, this property is located at 114 West Road. It's also identified as tax map 248 lot 8, and then we are proposing 35 residential units in the form of single family and duplexes clustered together, with 2 remaining parcels available for commercial development in the future. A little project history that I feel is important for the record. This application was before the planning board in a conceptual form back in October of last year. We sought to kind of clarify some items mostly related to use, density allocation, baseline density determination, and then bonuses, as well as architectural style, use of the open space, and then required studies. We then submitted for design review, which was heard in January with a follow-up meeting in February. We were before the board last month for a final subdivision review in June, and have since, and we're here before you today for, I believe that was 5. This will be our 5th planning board meeting. So with that stated, the goal here tonight is really to get clear determination of what we were trying to establish at the very beginning of this process, which is establishment of baseline density, allocation of the density allocation related to commercial and residential, use of the open space. When I have the plan up in front of you, you'll be able to see that we are intending to use some of that open space, or 50% open space lot, for passive uses such as the access road to the pump house with the associated well, and then some stormwater improvements, which we believe is allowed by the zoning, by the planning board, allowed to be in there by the planning board. Additionally, we talked about studies. We're aware of the fiscal study and then the traffic study, both of which are underway, and specifically the traffic study is, their traffic memo has been completed by GPI. It's sitting in draft form, but I will issue it once we have clear directive from this board of what the actual uses are intended. That way it can be updated in its updated in a correct form, submitted to the board once for review. And then a little sidebar here is we will be seeking a DOT permit. DOT will review that traffic memo. If you're not aware, West Road is pretty much entirely under DOT jurisdiction, all the way from the interchange to, I think it's 132. So that whole road there is under DOT jurisdiction. With that, I'd like to turn it to Nicola to show the renderings of the site to kind of, while we were out there to see what it looked like, I think this is a good time to kind of steer the focus to the vision that we have for this project and what we expect it to become and how we think it would be a real good positive for the town of Canterbury, especially at that intersection where it does appear like it needs some life given that gas station across the street. We hope that this will give that intersection some life. I don't know if we can. So generally, if you don't mind going back real quick, this is the overview of the project. Obviously, we're here for more for phase one, which is the residential component, and that's where you can see the residential clustered together in a cluster subdivision, and then that pad in the back reserved for the commercial area, and then there is that green pad which in the front closest to West Road reserved for the commercial area. This is just a better close-up view. We think that this is really a great neighborhood for, more specifically, the starter homes for trying to make it affordable. To make it affordable, you need to have higher densities. You need to have cluster densities to reduce infrastructure costs. And then this does give kind of a community feel where you can walk to your neighbor's house and have a barbecue. Your kid can ride, everyone knows each other. Your kid can ride their bike around that loop road there. And we think it would be a very inviting neighborhood. Okay. Just another kind of view. And this does kind of highlight what we were envisioning for being able to buffer that kind of main access road into the site with some form of landscaping. Out on the site walk, I stated how the architect got a little carried away with a stone wall, but I was envisioning that to be more of a berm with a fence on top of it and a landscape fence around it. Just a good representation to give you kind of scale of the project. So all these renderings were done based off of our Meridian site plan that the architect then put the houses that they're envisioning on there and really add some cars and some people for scale of the project. These are just some unique features of this project, which does allow for a more working class type of person, someone that is starting out in their career that may not be able to afford these ridiculous house prices that we're seeing here in New Hampshire, and give them an opportunity to, instead of renting, be an owner, pay a mortgage, and invest in their future. Furthermore, there are some natural forest buffers. Really, I made this statement to our team while we were kind of packing up here. This scale of development will probably have the least amount of trees I've ever cut down, mostly because of the development that has occurred before, but it literally will have the least amount of trees per unit that I've ever done, as well as that access road in the back will maintain most of that mature pines. A key point of this is the proximity to 93. It's obviously right off it. Some may see that as a negative in the project's mind with noise, but others may see that as a positive, where the majority of the traffic will be exiting town and going to Concord, probably to work, Concord for restaurants and so on. So there would be minimal amount of traffic going to town unless the town is having some form of event, or you gotta go in and register your car or pick your kid up at school. Just a good aerial view of the property. Really, none of the proposed work is occurring in the forested areas. There are some trees scattered about on that front portion that will likely be removed during construction. If we can save any, we would be glad to, given that they are mature. And it's hard to replace a mature tree with young landscaping, but I can't commit to any of that now until we have a more definitive design and see what I can save through the process. So we'd like to kind of familiarize the board with the development team here, some projects that they've done in the past to represent that this isn't just slap it together, sell it and move on. They do put together some nice products where this is a single family home that I believe Keith did. And as you can tell, it's well done, well through by the architect and well constructed. This is just another project of our scale. I believe Errol might have done this project, but it generally shows how if you design it appropriately, you can create a nice close-knit neighborhood with this type of scale of development. Just kind of moving through. Hutchinson Point, I drive by that probably every day. And when it was being developed before I was a member in Brady, and Errol did this one, and it really looked good and is well constructed, and has become a nice feature in the town of Milford. Just another example of how you can cluster units together and still make a nice product that the town could use.
Is that Winnisquam?
What was that?
Is that Winnisquam?
Was that the docks?
Stand down.
Oh, see. Thank you.
So I think these are just some other projects that they are large scale, but again, if they're well done by a good developer, they can be. And do you have images of those? Or? Well, this doesn't fit into that farm style that the ordinance wants and the town wants. It's just an example of what could be done, how you can cluster them together and still have a viable project that people want to live in, and they sell fast. So, really, in conclusion to this portion of the presentation, we think that this is a great product for the town. It really does the town good. It will present well, and then hopefully with the commercial portions and later phases will be a good offset on the tax base, and the fiscal study will likely represent that. So kind of moving back towards the regulations, where this project started was the applicants went before the town and they discussed what they should use this piece of property for. In doing so, they were told to kind of put their development goals on pause as the new master plan was being revised. It was being updated to meet the current needs of the town of Canterbury, the 10-year current needs of the town of Canterbury, as well as revisions to the zoning ordinances. With that, in the current master plan, under land use, encouraging a mixed use of densities in appropriate parts of town. Continue to promote economic development in areas of town that are well suited for business uses. Encourage the construction of housing for residents of all ages and income levels. And then under the housing section of it, support a mix of housing densities and types in Canterbury. Promote the use of cluster subdivisions and other zoning tools to increase the availability of housing. Encourage the development of additional residential units that are smaller and more affordable to accommodate downsizing seniors and young families. And then furthermore, there is, in the housing chapter, high priorities include previously noted support for cluster developments, support for mixed-use zoning in the vicinity of exits 17 and 18 to accommodate a mix of housing and small-scale retail/office uses. I kind of specifically pulled those out of the master plan because I think this project perfectly represents what the master plan is trying to accomplish. This project is trying to accomplish a different housing type than I believe than what Canterbury is currently having with single families and duplexes. It also is clustering them together to give that neighborhood vibe. It allows for the construction costs to be low enough to allow for young families to be able to hopefully afford these structures. So with that,
Any chance you could just move it back like
Yeah.
3 feet, so I think most of the public would be able to see it, and Josh should still be inside.
Okay.
Kevin, you couldn't really see the flash.
So while we did just have a site walk, I don't believe much of the public was there that I see behind me. And if they are all for this project, I think it would be good to give an overview of what the project is. So generally, the project is a vacant field with a tree line that circle is circular around it.
So is this the dark gray is the tree line?
Or dark gray is actually the steep slopes by the
Oh,
county
steep.
ordinance, but the tree line is located here as you move around. Generally though, where there are steep slopes, there are trees, so that is a good representation of it. There are 2 flat portions of the property, one being in the front and one being in the rear. And then as you work to the middle, there is a low section that you all saw that drops down roughly 10 to 20 feet. It is bordered by a brook that is located well within the tree line, and then also 93 that I'm sure we all heard while we were out there. It has been described by several people that the way that this property is today was caused by New Hampshire DOT's construction of 93, where they over-excavated the center of the property, which created a wetland, which I know we all saw it out there today. If it was me as a wetland scientist, I would not have flagged it that way. However, I'm not a wetland scientist, so they look at different functions and values, and that's where they classified that center portion as a wetland. It's a little unfortunate, however, a good use of that area in the upland area in the center of it is the pump house and well, because that area has to be precluded from development anyways. So that's a good location for that pump house and well.
Can you show us what it
So in this kind of dotted hatch here, there's kind of a meandering wetland. And then when we were standing over on the bank here, there was a raised portion here, and that's where we're going to place the pump house in the upland area, the center of the wetland. That way the well radius is protected by the wetland and precluded from further development. This section I probably actually should have presented before we started talking about existing conditions here, but we're obviously here seeking for a major subdivision approval, a CUP for the cluster subdivision, a New Hampshire driveway permit, which we are hopeful to submit before the next planning board meeting and after this one, once we have some clear directive. New Hampshire DOT excavation permit, which is just really more about doing construction within the right of way. You're going to dig in the right of way, put utilities in the right of way. That's what that's for. A New Hampshire DES alteration of terrain permit, which is triggered by 100,000 square feet of disturbance, which we are triggering. We are going to submit for. State subdivision approval for the size of the lots being less than 5 acres. A standard dredge and fill permit for the wetland permit, which is only for the access road to the pump house. So we are going through we are purposely choosing the smallest portion of the wetland to put the access road through to where that pump house will go. So there'd be a very minor wetland impact to have access to that pump house. And then at the time of construction, there will be several septic systems. Generally, they're either for individual units or will be shared amongst the duplexes. And then a public water supply permit. So as I stated earlier, the project consists of 35 single-family units with 2 commercial units, and then we are preserving over 50% of the area to go towards open space. And then with some of that area being the stormwater ponds that you probably in the well, pump house, and well. We plan to phase this project into 2 to 3 phases, where the first phase being the residential portion and the associated site improvements such as access road, stormwater improvements, and then well.
So say that again, phase 1 is what?
Phase 1 will be the residential portion of the development. with the stormwater improvements associated with the access into the site, and we'll stop just after we get past back up onto that mill that we kind of walked through, that kind of wooded tunnel there.
And phase two would be,
Phase two, and I'll call it 2A and 2B, depending on what goes first, will either be the commercial out front or the commercial in the back, the tent, and that'll be market driven. At which point in time we would expect them to be back before you for essentially a site plan approval for them to design a site. We have some examples of what could go there, where up front, we showed that, while very unlikely, and maybe in 20 or 50 years, a Starbucks could fit on that parcel. And more likely to be some form of retail or office space out front, could go up front there. And then we also showed that you could fit a self-storage facility in the back there. Which, point out here, so so when it comes to utilities, we're obviously going to be serving the residential portion with a well, with the public water supply well. And we expect that the front commercial portion would also need to be served by the public water supply well, based off of, you could fit an individual well in that front area there. And then the remainder, the back lot, could have the option of connecting to that public water supply well, or, which would probably make more economic sense, is drilling its own well at that time when they're under construction. Because running that water line all the way from that pump house would either go a long distance to not disturb the wetlands, or would have to go right through the wetlands. So it'd be probably more cost appropriate if they drilled their own well. However, we don't know that at this time because that's all kind of hypothetical and potential. Moving on, each individual unit will be served by a septic system, and then there obviously will be power running to the site, which I think in the West Road there is 3-phase power available. Fire, we still need to do some coordination with the fire department to see if the pump house is appropriate for fire protection, and if we could put some fire hydrants there, if that would be adequate, or if we need to do fire cisterns. At worst case scenario, we have to put a fire cistern in. And I've already touched on wetland impacts, and then when we move to stormwater, the site will be designed to the town stormwater regulations, and more importantly, will be designed to the state stormwater regulations.
Sam, could we go back to fire protection?
Yes.
Is it your intent then to put residential sprinklers in?
No, based off of the cost of them, it's, I think your guy said 15 to 18 grand per unit to put them in. It would probably be more cost appropriate to put a fire system
I'm going to respectfully disagree with that.
in. That's outside of my knowledge.
Understood.
So access and traffic, like I said before, once we have clear directive, we will provide the town with the traffic memo that GPI has produced. After if it needs to be modified, they'll modify it beforehand. The access will be governed by New Hampshire DOT, and we will be seeking an access permit from them.
What about the fiscal study? When is that anticipated?
What did Mark say?
He said it'd be 6 weeks from 2 weeks ago. So probably another month.
I apologize for the delay on that. So I recognize that I thought that I'd have it today, right before this meeting, but Mark was busy than I thought he would. So with that is the end of my presentation, unless you would like me to go into further detail on something else. But we'd be happy to hear what the board has to say, unless Eli, do you have anything that you would like to add?
No, I think that was great, Sam. We're of course happy to answer questions.
Yeah, so I think the two big things that it makes sense to address before we get into the details of proposed units, locations, all of the services for them is the version of the ordinance and the baseline density calculation, understanding that there's flexibility on bonus density that may come later. So if we start with those two, Eli, did you want to address the ordinance version first?
Again, the board was familiar with my letter last meeting. I don't think it helps any of us for me to reread those pieces, but based on our preliminary discussions, I believe we were told by the fact that we have come in within 12 months of having a preliminary plan review. So I believe we're under the previous version of the ordinance, but certainly we'll hear the chair out on your thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, so I'll read the section of the RSA site report and have some discussion. So RSA 676.12, it's paragraph 6, and starting with the second sentence. No proposed subdivision or site plan review or zoning ordinance or amendment shall affect a plat or application which has been the subject of notice by the planning board pursuant to RSA 676:4, Roman 1, little d, so long as the plat or application was subject of notice prior to the first legal notice of the change or amendment. The provisions of this paragraph shall also apply to proposals submitted to a planning board for design review pursuant to RSA 676:4, Roman 2, little b, provided that a formal application is filed with the planning board within 12 months of the end of the design review process. Turning to RSA 676:4, Roman 2, there's little a, which is preliminary conceptual consultation, which does not have notice to abutters, and there's little b, so Roman 2b, design review phase, which is occurs after notice to abutters, and in this case, the applicant did both present preliminary conceptual consultation and design review, and I did confirm with Cal and Shelley that was noticed design review. And so that I guess I'll keep going for a brief minute. I did also check for what it's worth. I think that ordinance is pretty clear, but the legislative history on that amendment was pretty clear. The purpose is if you're going to have meaningful design review, you can't create a race situation where the town has this opportunity to change the ordinance after an applicant has paid notice to abutters and come in for design review. If they come in for just preliminary conceptual where it's not noticed, you don't have that protection and there can be an ordinance change, but here was the latter. So it open to any discussion from the board, but the letter from attorney, I apologize, what's your last name?
Leno.
All right, Attorney Leno. That makes sense to me, based on my reading, but happy to hear everyone else's thoughts on the ordinance.
Can you clarify the part about the first notice? The first notice of the change in the ordinance?
No proposed subdivision or site plan, so it's so long as the application was subject of notice prior to the first legal notice of the change or amendment.
Right, so that's the question. When was the legal notice, first legal notice, and was that first legal notice
Good
before or
clarification.
after the design review?
February 12th, 2025 was what,
That's when it was closed. The first legal notice for, I believe, was January 3rd. If I'm counting 10 days prior to the January planning board meeting
but for which?
for the design review.
Right, so then,
So that's when we
Ms.
became.
McKay said hers was in February, so in terms of the
Oh,
sort
I
of
see.
race,
So
ours was.
January 3rd was design review notice, and what date in February?
From our communications, it was on February 12th, 2025.
February 12th is first notice of the changes to the ordinance. Good catch, thank you for that. Any other discussion on that point? All right. So it seems clear to me we're working with the version of the ordinance that was in effect on January 3rd, and they have a notice for design review. All right, so the second big outstanding question that we got to address is the baseline density calculation. So we all have I think it was document number 7. It's listed on the town website for that. It's the cluster density calculation. If you can walk through that with us first, we can have a
Sam, I think you're
What
probably,
is document number 7?
is there a date on that letter?
the June 3rd, 2024 cluster density calculation, baseline density determination. I think it was,
I had some other.
sorry, your footnote had document 7, so that's how I was
Yeah.
distinguishing between all the different application materials.
June 3rd.
Yeah, this is the same one, but it's from November 19th. I submitted it just as kind of the package of the application. Pull it up. Let's see. So, in determining baseline density determination, section 5.2, or sorry, 6.4.c of the Canterbury zoning ordinance is specifically referenced, which is the density or maximum number of residential dwelling units permitted in a cluster neighborhood may not exceed the density allowed under section 5.2 of the zoning ordinance, except when a request for density incentive is approved by the planning board under section 6.6 or 6.7. So then when you move back to section 5.2, minimum lot size standards, which is 5.2.a, and I would say specifically 1 because that's the one that mostly relates to area requirements, which is in computing the minimum lot acreage requirements under this article, any portion of the lot not suitable for building due to high water table as evidenced by open water or wetlands shall not be included. Open water or wetland that has been dredged, drained, or filled shall not be included in computing the minimum lot sizes, which the minimum lot size for this area is 1 acre. So I read that as you take the gross acreage minus the wetland area divided by 1 gives you the baseline density.
Board discussion of this piece. I think it makes sense to go through that before we get to anything else.
So roads, the roads are not exempted from that 1 acre.
So as I read 5.2a, it's, the starting point is gross area minus open water or wetland. Or if there was any other evidence of high water table, something that would affect. Actually, maybe to help us out, Sam, can you point to which of these plans has the total acreage and the total wetland calculation from the wetland scientist?
We originally submitted that, which
Is it the-
which the gross, and I'm more familiar with my earlier applications, but the gross acreage was 37.26 acres. The wetland area was 5.09 acres. And then the net tract area is 32.17 acres.
So back up. So I'm looking at the existing conditions plan. I see the certified wetland scientist stamp from Spencer Tate. Where's the total wetland area?
Probably don't have it on the existing conditions.
Which map are you referring to?
I was looking at existing conditions. I see the stamp. I don't see the calculation, but there's plenty of plans, so I just want to make sure that you
So
see the calculation.
the existing conditions plan isn't on that. I know it was submitted with the original design review and we submitted the that calculation.
0%, so it's 5.09.
Do you subtract out steep slopes
I do not,
cause?
because of the strict reading of that section. And this is where I think there's some confusion here. This section essentially defines portions of the lot not suitable for building. And this is due to high water table or evidence of open water. And so I'm going to a section that allows me to establish, I'm going from a section that says how to establish density that points me in this direction here on how to establish the density.
And we considered this in terms of the canons of construction, in terms of reading a piece of legislation which have been held by our Supreme Court to zoning ordinances as well. We can't add words that the legislature, in this case the planning board in town as adopting this town meeting, didn't see fit to include. But the other piece here is that there are sections of your ordinance that do exclude steep slopes. So we can look at that and assume that based on canons of construction, again, that if they had wanted to include them here, they would have. So we won't read those in because they're not listed.
Can you help me out? Because your letter refers to section 16, but can you point us to exactly where in that workforce housing ordinance was the reference to steep slopes? So we're all on the same page.
Yeah, if you can control that by
Is it D2? Is it anywhere else? So 16.4 D2. I think page 81, I see it's a reference. I just want to make sure I'm not missing any additional with that.
I believe in my
Article 16.
review from like 6 months ago, that was the only spot where I could find steep slopes specifically within the zoning ordinance.
So we're all on the same page. So Article 16, titled Workforce Housing Ordinance. When you get to section D of page 81, D2 says, under conditional use permit, there's a yield plan depicting the approximate development potential of the parcel. There's a table about deducting for wetlands, steep slopes, septic wells, 25% for roads when needed, and any other non-buildable variable as indicated in the zoning ordinance or site plan or subdivision regulations as appropriate.
So you're not claiming in any way that this is workforce housing?
So it's not a workforce housing conditional use permit. So I think, if I understand it right, they're saying,
The reason I ask is to the extent that there's any benefit anywhere else.
so that line is clear about what gets deducted and where am I at here? No, I've lost my other page. Cluster road submission, Article 6.
Were you able to find out? I see the stamp of the wetland scientist as well, but where the number 5.07?
I can provide a exhibit for the next planning board meeting if that will appease the rest of it.
It's not on this, on the existing condition?
It won't be on the existing conditions.
Question, have we historically applied steep slopes?
I don't think there's been an application under this. Just part of why design review sort of peered out is we didn't have anything that we could refer to and discuss. So this is issue of first impression for the planning board. The other piece, just so we all have it on page 35 under our cluster neighborhoods, 6.4. I. Steep slopes are referenced in terms of the 50% total land area as designated open space, but not in the section on density.
Which letter is that?
6.4I on page, bottom of the page.
Is that the portion that the developers claim doesn't apply because it was after enactment?
Oh, that's, honestly, I
think you're.
okay.
I have the old version of the ordinance here.
Yeah, okay.
Which section do you want on that?
What does I look like if it exists?
This is 6.5.
6.4.
I can read it into the record if you.
That would be helpful. We can circulate a copy of the old ordinance after the next one.
So 6.4I, 50% of the total area of the parcel shall remain undisturbed as designated open space, except for activities and improvements approved by the planning board after the consultation with the Conservation Commission. The following restrictions shall apply to the designated open space. There shall be no further subdivision of or development of the designated open space areas, which shall be preserved in perpetuity as undisturbed areas used only for uses approved by the planning board. The designated open space shall be permanently deeded to an owners association, which shall be responsible for taxes, maintenance, compliance with Article 6.4.I.1 of this ordinance in the cost of conservation monitoring as specified by the town. 3, legal instruments which preserve the open space. Sorry,
You're reading the current one, aren't you?
I'm reading the past one.
This is the revised 04 of 2024, I believe, right? Is that what we were just talking about?
Yes.
Yes.
Let's see here. Where was I? Let's say 3, legal instruments which preserve the designated open space in perpetuity, including the language of the deed restrictions, if applicable, shall be submitted to the planning board for approval. The planning board may refer these instruments or restrictions to town council for review. 4, the planning board shall require a program for future monitoring of easements and permit conditions affecting the designated open space. End of section.
Okay. So that 5 that's in the current ordinance was added, and that's not there for purposes of this application.
Question, the road and pump house, is that being built in open space?
That is, and that's where we would need planning board approval and consultation with the Conservation Commission to allow for that, as well as the stormwater improvements.
Is there an alternative
Um,
location?
That honestly is the best location for it. The alternative is decreasing some of the other development areas, such as that commercial portion in the back, to a smaller size to offset that area associated with that pump house.
So, which of the plans shows the, at least for the current application, the total open space population?
The subdivision plan that will show it has not been created yet because we need to have these conversations.
So at least based on this, what is the current open space? Or not, well, yeah, you can show it too. It'd be
Yeah,
helpful, but the
it's
total amount.
essentially right at 50%, including all those. So where you see this.
For the record, can you tell us which plan you're reading?
No. So 01 sheet 7. Where's the sheet? So generally, where you see this bold dashed line, in here is developed area, in here is developed area, in here is developed area, and then this access road.
So everything outside of that large dash, those
Yeah.
2 areas with the large dash lines.
With the exception of this access road here.
Are you including those little triangle up at the south?
Right here?
west? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that contiguous?
I don't believe that's a requirement. I think that was conversation that we had or a topic that we brought up.
Yeah, and that piece too, I think the.
What's the area, the southernmost area that's gonna be developed as commercial, in the event that a commercial developer says, I need 10 more feet, and, for whatever, or 50 or 100, given that you're right at 50%, I mean, I don't have the square feet calculation, assuming that there's not much room for error there in the event that a commercial developer needs a little bit more.
That's an interesting question. So I don't know if they would have the right to come in and ask the board for that, come in and ask the ZBA for a variance from the ordinance, but I would assume that it's similar to, this is my property, right? This is the lot that I'm working with. And you can't go onto your neighbor's property without there being some form of lot line adjustment for that. So I would think that you can't do that unless you're receiving a variance from the ZBA to reduce the open space requirement.
So Josh, to get it on 6.4 ID3, which talks about legal instruments preserving the designated open space. So this gets through here. Whatever the open space is that's on that plan, we're sort of stuck with that. It's on the unit owners to fit whatever they're going to do within their little areas without getting into that open space.
Do you ever take your shoulder?
A lot of that going on.
So I guess there were 8 members of the planning board.
That one's not a lot to vote.
Yeah,
All right. So backing up and maybe before we get into the rest, any thoughts on the gross area minus the 5.09 wetland area, leaving 32.17 area for initial baseline calculation?
Clarification.
Yeah.
Are the commercial areas part of that gross area or not?
They are, the entire portion of the property is started with the total property area and then reduced down to the wetland area.
So I think, at least on the current plan, it would be the 2 commercial areas are units 1 and 2.
Yeah, so those are part of our
And then
32.
the duplexes count as 2 units, and then the single family counts 1 unit. So that's how they're
Oh,
going
okay.
here.
All right. So our commercial entities count as a unit
Yes.
for the purposes of calculation.
And you have 8 buildings there, I mean, at least proposed or pictured.
Is one ownership.
So that's one unit,
Yeah.
And that may be something that maybe we have to talk about too, is what types of uses that second commercial lot is used for. So they're talking about self-storage, but
How much space is
Unless there's-
occupied by that large commercial section? Because we're talking about a calculation that's based on minimum lot size of an acre, but that commercial section is taking up more than an acre.
well, yeah, well, I think that's the point of the cluster. None of these are going to have an acre. It's you're figuring out how many units you can have, and then you try to cluster them somewhere and take a bunch of the property out so that
Yeah.
on
He's
average,
talking about-
No,
talking about this one.
I understand
Yeah.
that. I'm talking
But-
about.
I don't know which plan shows the acreage of that.
Well, I'm just, like, if the whole thing is 35 or so, then that large commercial block has to be more than a single acre.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's approximately 5. Yeah, the total building square footage is roughly around 60,000 square feet
In this,
in that plan, but this is all conceptual at that
Right.
point.
So you're calling one unit, on the south side, that's one unit, commercial, and then unit 2 commercial is on the road. And those are, is that how you're counting it?
Yes.
just keep us focused before we get there.
I'm gonna do way off topic.
No, I don't think that's off topic. I think the starting point is where we need to figure out total number of units and discuss what they're doing with the units. I'm just talking about
Sure.
the calculation. So that we have something we're working with to sort of move to the next step. And their calculation is 37, subtract the wetland,
5.9.
it leaves you with 32 units, and then there's density that they want, and we'll get to that at some point, and let them know to do that. But does that make sense to everyone on board, that we, as the ordinance is written, that 32.17 is the acreage that we're using to find the baseline density of 1 acre units that they're
So
on?
that is not how one would do it. If you were an engineer and you had that property, you say, okay, I'm going to put in 35 separate houses, and to divide it up under our ordinance, it's not a simple mathematical problem. It's a layout problem and figuring how it all works. And we would have, so we have a town engineer who will be reviewing this, I believe. We have third-party reviews. I expect it, and I would think we'd ask our town engineer to show us how to lay out this plan so that it had 35 units, to show us what the baseline is, show us what the legal layout we can do to get the mass number of units of the type you want. That's how I would do it.
You mean, if I understand you right, you would want to lay it out in a conventional way and make sure you can get 32 units or 32 units, and if not,
I think that's what the ordinance says. The ordinance says that the number would be the same as if you did it without the cluster.
If I can respond to that, again, in other places in your ordinance, there are calls for a yield plan. There's not in this section, which is exactly what you're saying, where you draw the vanilla boxes. If it's 1 acre zone, you draw your 1 acre, and then you subtract roads, et cetera, to get them to a compliant straight subdivision. But that's nowhere in this cluster.
Well, it doesn't say a yield plan, but it says as the same as if it was done without the cluster. That's a yield plan. What it says in the ordinance is a yield plan.
But again, other places distinctly call out the yield plan.
Well, this distinctly calls out to follow the ordinance.
Oh,
can anyone locate section 5.2 in the ordinance?
page 20, or page 20 of the plan. Yeah, 19 to 20.
Yes, thank you.
Same in the
Okay, it says the density may not exceed the density allowed under section 5.2 except for the incentives, right?
Mhm.
And in 5.2, in 5.2, computing minimum lot depth and width, each lot must contain within its bounds a rectangle meeting these requirements. Each side is parallel from the boundary, that traditional way we do it.
But that's only for a compliant subdivision lot.
Well, the 6.4 references 5.2, so I think 5.2 applies.
You don't think it would be A4 that's more on point though?
Which section are you for?
5.2.
Basically, it makes the duplex would be 1.75 on a normal subdivision. Or was it 1.5 or 1.75 times 1.75? So it'd be 1.5 for a normal subdivision duplex.
So you haven't done a 5.2
No, they would,
analysis of this?
Yeah, I think if that applied, if A4 applied, I think they'd be entitled to more units based on duplex. They're looking at, if I'm understanding right, correct me if I'm wrong, just A1 and interpreting density to mean area.
Right.
And they're looking just at the one that deals with normal area and applying that to the cluster subdivision and not looking at the other three, including you've got the one on rectangle, which again I think would be harmful to their total number, and 4 of a lower density for 2-family, which would be helpful to their proposal. So some help, some hurt, but they're ignoring 2, 3, and 4 and looking just at density.
And again, with all due respect to the board, these are the questions we've been trying to raise for almost a year now, because it's just not an easy to follow piece, and I understand that you haven't had this particular application of your ordinance before, so we're all sort of in the same boat on this one.
And maybe I just have it in the wrong spot. I thought when I looked at all your application materials, there was a plan that just showed lots with building envelopes to show that conceptually you could fit this many, like 35 lots. Is that a plan that's here?
Yes, you are correct. As part of the CUP process, there is a plan that says to reasonably demonstrate that you can do this. I believe that came up with 24, and then when you add in the ADUs that are allocated to each single-family lot, you're upwards to the 40s, 48. And since these are condos, they won't have ADUs. So we're still floating around that. We're still on the low side of whichever way you want to.
That, and I don't know where that plan
It was a separate exhibit.
And it had 24 for distinct lots, hypothetical structure.
And it's a plan that makes no sense given what we're trying to accomplish here.
I don't think you can apply for it because you're not building proposed 2-family or multifamily uses. You're proposing a condominium cluster.
There are a lot of 2-families in here.
I understand that, but it's a.
Agreed, and I don't think they are.
Okay, I know, but I understand. So 4 is irrelevant to us, and I think 1, 2, and 3 are. 1, I think you complied with, but I just haven't been convinced yet that 2 and 3 don't apply, and if 2 applies to the comments that Greg made, the counting would be, I don't know if it's more or less, but it would just be done differently. You have to just block it out.
And that is the nature of the plan Sam was discussing, that original sort of vanilla box.
So that's our question.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what we've got.
Well, how do we answer that, and do we get our lawyer to do that? Like, who answers this?
I don't like that. I mean, it's our ordinance. This is the first application, so that's what we sort of have to grapple with. I at least when I'm, when you're reading cluster subdivision together with regular minimum lot standards, it makes sense to me that you're just looking at the acreage or density and not, because it's not a subdivision in the sense that you're putting a buildable envelope on this much frontage, this parallel block.
And they're not true.
And then
I disagree.
And that's why they're then squeezing it in.
It's a subdivision.
Well, I understand that. I'm trying to really understand. That's my view, but that's the discussion I'm hoping we can continue having.
Well, I think we just try to figure out what it means and follow what it says. Is what I would approach it.
Yeah, Scott and Megan, any sort of initial thoughts on how to interpret those two pieces together and how we're figuring it out?
So looking through their letter and calculations in the ordinance, I'm in agreement with their calculations. To me, that makes sense. And I do think that if we get on a different road, maybe more units, more development there.
I don't know if that's true, but it's pretty specific in computing minimum lot depth, minimum lot size standards, computing minimum lot depth and width. Each lot must contain within its bounds rectangle meeting the requirements, the size, parallel, all that, and you do that blocking, like Greg is saying, and then you squeeze it in the best you can, and how many do you have? And that, I don't know if it's fewer than 32, but I don't think you can sort of just ignore.
So Sam, the original concept plan there for the straight subdivision. I think that meets what Mr. Gordon is discussing, right?
Yeah, so that was where we did run a road through it, and did meet the minimum frontages and minimum depths and minimum areas. And that comes up with, I can only pull it up here.
This is something you showed us at for the,
It is not, really, because our density determination is going to that section because our interpretation has always been this section most appropriately represents how they calculate density in my experience in many other towns where you go based off of that area calculation. So that plan was never presented to this board now.
Michelle's going up to get the file from last year, because she thinks that something like this might have been
Maybe
submitted.
maybe I was looking at one of the prior ones, no,
Yeah,
not this one, okay.
No, it was submitted for on the June 3rd meeting.
yeah, so she's gonna go up and look for it, and I don't know if it still applies, or
Right.
does exist.
Yeah,
You want to just shut down what's on your screen here, just for.
Are you looking at the conventional 100?
So then we did provide this as an
I've seen
exhibit
that one.
in there, and obviously this doesn't make sense. No one wants this.
Right.
It's got wetland impacts. There's challenges to it.
And how many, I mean,
That comes up with 24, and then when you apply ADUs to it, which I believe, I'm not sure what the most recent RSA has come out with, we're at 48 12 units.
you haven't taken out the wetlands.
I don't feel like the
and
ADUs are relevant.
some of those were,
In the
how
area.
many of those were above 1.5 acre, for example? I just, in
Oh,
the sense that how many of them
because because I did subtract the wetlands out of those lot acreages. So, and yes, roads go through wetlands, right? But it's a wetland permit that we could receive. It'd be challengeable, it would be expensive, but they're challenging and it would be expensive and it makes it legal, but it doesn't make any sense. So that's where, again, in interpreting the master plan with the housing prices, it seems like a good development, and it fits into the regulations as best as we feel we can fit in, given the ambiguity in specifically which section to fall under.
Where do you find the double application for ADUs? Where does?
A single family lot is allowed by right to have a ADU, and the state just passed a law that
I was gonna
allows it to be
show it to
detached as well as.
And you think the ADU law that requires the allowance of ADUs affects the minimum lot size standards in our ordinance?
I'm not
No,
saying
he's
that.
saying you
I'm
could have
saying,
more units.
I'm saying that if this was built, the town could theoretically have 48 units, dwelling units.
Well,
I don't know that.
No,
that's
that's-
No,
well,
they're not
unit and
subdividable.
ADU.
Those units aren't subdividable. ADUs are not subdividable.
We had some conversations in the early planning board meetings, I can't remember if it's at conventional or conceptual or at design review. There was discussion about, are we gonna allow for ADUs? The board was already getting into this discussion of, are we gonna try and double our units in our condos, in our condo dwelling units, and we said no. So we're not trying to, we're basically,
It's not allowed.
So,
so that would, the plan you showed us on your computer, that's not a condo development.
That would be a straight
is
subdivision.
housing development.
Yeah.
and this is where
Feasible lots.
I kind of get stuck. If I look at 6.4, it talks about the density, the maximum number of residential units, and then it refers to section 5.2. And it uses the word density, and then 5.2a is minimum lot size standards. The word density is not actually there. And then we have two, one for minimum lot acreage and one for minimum lot depth. to me, it makes sense that density is referring to sort of the acreage, the total amount, and then you're squeezing it, not that you would have to basically show an entire regular subdivision to then show a cluster subdivision to move them around. And that's the question, and
I mean,
I'm sort of gotta figure out.
Your reading of this is consistent with my understanding of it when we were writing this, for what that's worth. And I think in some cases it's probably an unreasonable expectation for people to develop a theoretical, tentative, traditional subdivision plan only to not use it. That seems functionally silly.
Rich, if you're able to, because I wanted to sort of get everyone to at least weigh in a little bit. I haven't heard from you or Megan yet. Do you have any thoughts on how we're looking at 5.2A in conjunction with 6.4C? And you are on mute to the extent.
No, I don't have my zoning ordinance with me, but I tend to think at the way Greg is in terms of looking at the units, the whole units first. That makes sense?
Yeah. And Megan, you have initial thought? So it may be that we're just going to have to, there's sort of two ways to read this. We're going to have to vote and take a, here's how we interpret it, and then either they have to come back with something else or it's moving forward.
It's tough because I see both. I do think that the ADU argument is irrelevant unless you're building ADUs onto those. That's really not everybody builds an ADU. So there's potential, but that's not actual. I'm going to agree with Scott and Brendan on this one.
I have another question.
That's really
In the plan you showed us on your computer, does it comply with the, I understand it complies with 5.281, with the wetlands and so forth. Does it comply with the minimum lot depth and width? Weird lines we have.
100% on the width, because I interpreted width as frontage.
Okay.
Although it was typically a zoning ordinance, that's how it refers to width. The depth is generally complied with, but as you probably are aware of any lot here in town, nothing is a perfect rectangle. So like some of them are triangles or some of them are squished down. Yes.
But I mean, you have to draw that rectangle within the lot.
Well, that's where like it comes down to a triangular form.
Are you able to draw the appropriate rectangle within each of those lots as depicted on your?
You're saying maintain the width, the entire length of the depth.
No, so if you look up above at the start of 5.2, and I think for commercial it's right 1 acre is the minimum lot acreage, but then depth and width is 150 feet by 200. So it's just, is there a 150 by 200 rectangle with right?
No, not all of them comply with the width all the way to the depth. No.
Not width all the way to the depth. The question is, right, if you have like a weird triangle, you can put a rectangle in it, right? The question is for each of those, can you put that 150 foot by 200 foot rectangle in each of those?
So you don't really get 24. You get something less than that. If you were going to make a traditional subdivision and comply with the rectangle stuff, it would be something less than 24. Right.
Yeah.
And Chair, I'd like to get my agreement that I do have some questions about the open space. Which is if you want to, I don't want to like.
Yeah, well, it may be.
Things,
I think the right now the way I see it is we figure out the sort of baseline acreage and the baseline lots, and then the question of whether or not their cluster complies with having sufficient open space can sort of come after. Because and as they say, if the answer is you have to have some amount fewer, they would presumably come back with another plan that has open
They're like,
space.
"Yeah, it's like, no,
Right,
we'll do, yeah.
yes. So, I guess what I'd suggest is any further comments, we'll put any further discussion on interpreting those two pieces, but then we take a vote basically on how to interpret that, so they have something that we're applying to this application.
I think at the risk of throwing a bit of a wrench in all of this, like my question here is, if we're designating this rather large chunk as commercial, can we still count this as part of the acreage for the purpose of determining how many house lots we can put in? Now, I don't know if that's supported by the ordinance, it's just like thinking,
Yeah.
the spirit of the law here, like.
I see these as great questions and how to handle these requests and all that, but that's sort of after we figure out our units, it's what can they do with their units and does this plan comply?
All right.
So step one is, what's the language of the ordinance and how we're applying it? And then step two is, we actually look at the plan and see if there's enough open space, see if the
Order of
layout's right,
operations.
see if the commercial units work, if that makes sense.
Sure.
All right. Any other thoughts on 6.4 and 5.2?
I think we have to, I think it has to comply with the rectangle in each of the lots that would be proposed if this were a traditional subdivision. And that the rectangle in 5.2A2 has to be complied with, essentially what Greg said, I think.
So, yeah, I think maybe I'll just sum up what I think the two positions are, if Greg and Josh jump in if I got it right. So, we've got 6.4 A.C., which says the density or maximum number of residential dwelling units permitted in a cluster neighborhood may not exceed the density allowed under section 5.2 of the zoning ordinance, and then ignoring incentives for now. And so the two sort of ways that we have discussed interpreting that is, one, density refers to, under 5.2A1, we look at the minimum lot acreage, we subtract the wetlands, and we're just dividing it. And version 2 is you look at 5.2A1 and 2, and you have, and 3, and you have to basically have a plan that shows that number of lots with meeting all of the dimensional requirements, both acreage and depth and width. That's your baseline. So those are the two versions. Does that make sense? Everyone on the same page?
Yeah, I think that's what the ordinance says.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
can I just, if 1 through 3 are included, why, if we have a proposal with duplexes, can 4 not be included then? I don't know how that makes sense to exclude one of these subs if you, I mean, we can change our lot size.
This isn't a
and
two-family
use
or
that.
multifamily use, this is a cluster development.
Well,
That we-
right, but it's not a cluster development if our hypothetical is putting in a straight subdivision. So we still have hypothetical duplexes in our straight subdivision.
I would agree with you if we, I think the ordinance says you have to apply all of 5.2.
1
all
to
of it.
4 versus
Yeah.
1
And
to
that would
3.
include what you're talking about there.
And you might get a 25% bump if they're all duplex. or
Right.
something.
And
Which
again,
pointed back to about that 3,200, give or take. Just saying, this may be a wash in the amount dollars.
Let's call it a wash.
I mean, for me, it's not about the number, it's about following.
That's a lovely
what
idea
the-
from a
what the
speeding
ordinance
perspective.
says.
Agreed. I think so. That's where I think there's two interpretations that we've discussed, and it makes sense where there are 7 of us, so hopefully no tie votes. We can make a decision as the board as how do we interpret 5.2A when it's being read in as the density requirement under 6.4C. I don't care if I just do roll call and I'll have to go through and you can say whether is it 5.2A1 we're referring to acreage is what we're looking at for density, or whether it's 1 through 4 and all of those have to be included when we're determining density as that word appears in 6.4. So I'll just,
Brendan,
yeah.
sorry, may I throw one more wrench in
You can definitely, again,
this? So I
we're the
think,
board that got stuck with
like-
the first interpretation, so.
and because we're probably setting some precedent here, I think
You're really not, because you have a rezoning ordinance that will apply to anything future. So this is,
this is valid,
But
but
it is a
maybe
key
irrelevant.
legal issue in case there's an appeal in the direction.
So, well, and this may be wrong to that. If we're thinking about like what's the worst case scenario of each of these interpretations, it seems like kind of the worst case scenario would be like a total area that is perhaps very long and thin, that's unusually, strangely shaped such that you couldn't get very many conforming lots out of it. Then you would have a situation where conforming lots would give you a much smaller number of allowable units versus the strict acreage calculation. Does that make sense?
Is the question you're asking if the lot were so that shaped that you couldn't get the
Let's say it's very long
150
and
by
thin, we can only
200.
get, I don't know, 5 conforming lots out of it or
Right.
something, for whatever reason. Like, that's the situation in which the number would be very, very different.
might be different? Yes, that's right.
And that's kind of, like, that's almost like the real concern is what happens in that situation.
I think you still have to apply the ordinance.
Well, sure. But clearly we have a disagreement about how we apply the ordinance, and therefore we're in the wrong interpretation, which nobody likes.
I like clear numbers.
And I mean, from a clear numbers perspective, like doing a straight acreage calculation is certainly much simpler.
All right.
Just throwing that
All right. This is great. So, I guess what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a roll call so we get it all. So, I'm trying to find a way we can actually do version 1. Is density refer just to the acreage requirements, or does density refer to acreage, lot, depth, and width? Is a way of describing it. I'm going to go left to right, and then loop in Greg at the end. So, Scott.
Acreage, only.
All right, Megan.
You can mess this up for me. Acreage only.
Greg.
I think we should follow all the provisions of 5.2 as it says in the ordinance.
Yeah, acreage, depth, and width. I think it is, the word density refers just to lot acreage. Logan,
acreage.
Josh,
All four of them.
and Rich.
Depth and width.
Okay. With that, the decisions after this is we're looking at density based on acreage. After that, the next question, which we've touched on a bunch, is what is a unit and open space and how that fits in. So how are we looking at open space? How are we looking at units and the division between residential and commercial? I think it makes sense to talk about that before we talk about anything like density bonus. That makes sense, but open to other suggestions. All right.
I think we should address third-party review at some point tonight because it takes time. And we don't want to hold things up.
So let's make the list. So what we got to figure out is units, open space count, third-party review. All right. To me, it kind of makes sense to still talk about units and open space count first for third party, because if we're saying, right, for example, that this corner can't be included and some other things, that they need to come back with a different plan. Maybe of that more concrete plan. So anyway, in terms of calculating open space, I think the questions that I heard, and jump in if you have any others, is doesn't need to be contiguous. So we had that question about sort of the corner. Does this long access road that goes to the commercial lot in the south, can that be part of the open space or not? Does the well access, that like small road to access the pump, does that count as part of the open space? Are there any others?
But it's undisturbed, so that would be the infiltration cost, anything that's disturbed.
Yes. Where's the?
And on the sidewalk, you had mentioned adding up the pond. Is that in the open space area?
We were talking about moving units and then putting the pond where it is, and then those units would go into one of the spots where there is the open space area in that corner there, so we'll change things up. And so once we kind of take all this information, we'll come in with a revised plan and revise open space.
Okay. And
So-
just-
Essentially, that's moving open space, not removing open space.
There's three shaded parts. I just want some clarity on what these are. What is this little?
There's a little pond right there. Yeah.
That's a pond. Okay, this
Pond, yeah.
and then this.
Pond.
Okay, gotcha.
Sorry, Ms. Meg, was one of your three this one?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And those are already there, or the proposed pond?
They're proposed
Okay, in the open space.
in the open space. Yeah. And I recognize it says undisturbed, but then it also allows for some uses to be in there with approval from the planning board. So we recognize we're seeking your approval on that with consultation with the Conservation Commission, which will have to go before them. But if there's an affirmative no here, we'll likely consider that. Their main standpoint is they're generally passive.
So, if we're looking at open space, the provision on page 35 is 50% of the total land area of the parcel shall remain undisturbed as designated open space, except for activities and improvements approved by the planning board after consultation with the Concom. And then there's the additional conditions, which is no further improvements and a permanent deeded restriction. And then there was 6.4C, density or maximum number of residential dwelling units. And I think the way at least this application is proposing it is units is, they're including the commercial uses as units in their total calculation. And the duplexes are counting as 2 units.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I count.
So our questions are, any guidance in terms of how they need to apply the designated open space piece? Frankly, I guess first blush to me, the idea of a small non-contiguous parcel doesn't make any sense to me. I could envision this ordinance allowing multiple open space, like significant open space areas if there were 2 large areas, something like that, but not something where there is a section that is cut off.
Too small.
Too small, so.
Could you put a house on it?
No.
And
Yeah, those are.
It is adjacent to undeveloped land, so it is, while it's not contiguous with our open space, it's contiguous with undeveloped land. I'm not sure.
Undeveloped, but not undevelopable.
undisturbed, well, it'll be a permanent restriction.
No, the adjacent.
Oh, I see. So, I read that as has to be effectively contiguous, something where that open space is controlled. I don't feel like that meets a bit of a corner. The other question, I tend to think that the language undisturbed as designated open space is going to exclude something like the access road to access the commercial property.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
The fact that it's contiguous, is non-contiguous is the obvious thing. But the purpose of the open space, the purpose of open space is for people to use it. And really, it's unusable because it's behind somebody's backyard. And you would either have to trespass on their land or trespass on the neighbor's land in order to get to it. So it's technically open space, but it's not usable as open space.
And I think that was the whole contiguous argument. It doesn't say contiguous, but the intent of that open space is usability and environmental protection. I think, well, it's environmental protection, that makes sense, but
Sam,
that corner doesn't.
If you scale that, how much space are we talking? Because I think this might
Gotta
be
A couple.
negligible in terms of the overall count.
Probably a half acre, maybe.
Right, but worth having this discussion so you don't come back with another plan that has other corners if that's the board says. Currently, at least with this plan, your 50%, if I understood, it does include that road that's going to the southern portion, correct?
It does not.
It does not include the road, okay. And it does include though
That triangle portion that you.
the much bigger triangle by the two existing, the Patterson and Piper Lundberg lot. Yeah, if you just shade it.
Oh, it does include that as well.
So it includes that.
And the well, road to the well and the well area.
Yes,
And he said-
the bigger triangle to the east, that's accessible by a resident because there's roads.
Yeah, that's basically contiguous, but for the,
And so we're on the same page. We're talking about effectively about 18.5 acres of open space. It's 15%, 37 and change for a lot. I had trouble following the property line.
It's
It
along
says we have
it's
this-
along the
we have
brook.
this-
Along the brook.
So where does the boundary hit the brook?
So. The base, and then it follows this brook.
Oh, so it just follows the brook in the south.
Yeah. So it follows the fence and then it jumps across to the brook.
Oh, that's the dark one's fence.
And this is the zoning line, but there's a fence underneath it. And then once it gets to here, it then jumps to the brook and then follows the brook. So it's a very abnormal property line.
So the property line is along the zone line?
Until
For half of it.
this part.
I know,
Yeah.
but, yeah.
Until it gets to the top.
I think I see that down.
So I guess the next topic is like stormwater basins and that access path.
Yeah,
And like that, access to that well is limited. If you're only there if you really have an issue. Not even sure about filing it, if they have to file it during snowstorms.
and it's the proposed, the 3 stormwater basins, that's as part of a stormwater plan, and it's to help.
Yeah, that's to mitigate for the increase in stormwater runoff and volume generated by this development and treat it before it goes into the wet. And really for the counting of that area is conserving as much area in that commercial lot in the rear there. Is the main intent of it, and really choosing uses that are more passive than uses that are passive. It's not like a structure with a stormwater pond, you're just kind of looking over it. And then same thing with that access road as well, also just kind of sitting there. It's not really
I think it makes some sense to include the ponds are part of the open space. That doesn't seem to.
That kind of makes sense to me. If I'm looking at the larger triangle where it's steep slopes and it's cut off by the driveway, that doesn't seem like it fits the spirit of, or something along those lines wouldn't fit the spirit of open space where it doesn't feel usable, but, or, contiguous, although I think there could be a situation where there's multiple contiguous areas. Any other thoughts on those two pieces, what Josh was talking about with whether stormwater collection as part of the stormwater plan could be in the open space, and the use of for that.
So we have to consult with Conservation Commission on that.
We would have to consult with Conservation Commission if, for example, we said, right, the stormwater improvements because they are disturbed, or if we said that the well could be part of the 50%. So making a decision like that would require. I think the goal hopefully is we provide direction in open space, they come back with a plan. That's the plan that we would be going to Concom if they're saying, here's the specific things that to make this work, we need to be in the open space. So,
Yeah, we might go back to ComScom before coming back to you here in this direction. Get their input, bring it back before you to receive the affirmative thumbs up from the rather since you guys are ultimately the decision makers, we gotta hear from you first, then go to ComScom.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that makes sense to me, which is if you are disturbing something in the open space, that's an improvement in the context of that. It can be part of the 50%, but it has to be part of that.
Open space doesn't have to be undisturbed before it's open space, it has to be undisturbed after it's open space.
Remain,
But no further subdivision of the designated open space.
I disagree with that.
Yeah, that's not.
How do you figure?
I look at the word remain undisturbed, meaning it's undisturbed before and it continues to be undisturbed. That's why it's remain undisturbed. And certainly it looks like from the sidewalk, most of this area is going to be
We had an
entirely
extensive
undisturbed.
discussion about
Yes.
disturbing of space and whatnot.
Well, I would love for the whole board to take that precedent. I think it really almost doesn't even matter if the board is willing to accept those uses in there.
A sense of the board, my sense is those kinds of things would be okay if we approve them with consultation with the Conservation Commission. My sense is the smaller areas like those two that are effectively not usable by anyone or not open space as the ordinance sort of envisions it, which is usable space. I think that seems to be the sense of everyone. Is there any large disagreements with that?
I'm okay with the big triangle being part of the open space, but not the little one.
Thoughts on that? I think that'll be pretty important as we saw the proposed roads, whether or not they're including that or not including that.
Yeah, to me, that makes sense. And I agree with what Josh just said about the big triangle. I think will be accessible just by crossing a road, so.
Let's get a sense.
What did you say? You said something.
I tend to think no. Josh and Scott tend to think that is large enough and it is accessible enough. It's just separated by a road. That would be fine to include in open space. Megan and Greg, you thoughts on that piece?
I agree with you, Brendan, on both of the corners.
I would tend to think that also must agree on the small corner that's at the top of the map. But yeah, okay, so you tend to think that larger corner should not be included. Greg, did you have a thought on that?
I would agree with that. It's about the word contiguous. And I would say that municipal association.
It doesn't
We
say.
don't.
Contiguous is not.
We
That's
don't-
more intent than.
Yeah, we don't have the word contiguous, but that's why we're making an intent of the open
We had
space
the word
argument.
contiguous, this would be more.
Take that for the next word.
Oh, well, we have a thought on
I mean, I think I'm in agreement with you about that tiny little corner. That tiny little corner
Yep.
basically doesn't exist. And I can't recall who's coming down where on the larger triangle bit.
So,
This larger triangle bit like might or might not end up being where two houses end up, and then the open space gets moved to another location.
Which sounds like the board's preference
Yeah.
anyway, so,
It kind of sounded like it was your preference too, honestly. But
only because we thought you liked it.
at least you're being honest about it.
so any opposition then to, let's open it up to public comment because of the time that we're at, and then after public comment, we'll give sort of a firm how we feel with that so that the public can weigh in on that piece as well as the others.
And we are
And
numerically right at the 50%.
We have some room to play with, but it's not substantial.
any final plan will have to be.
Does that mean we're not gonna get to the units tonight?
I think we should talk about that, we let the public weigh in on that piece and whether a single one, and then we can try to have a,
If we're going to get to public comments, and people are going to
that's what I was suggesting, yes. We'll do that, because everyone's been waiting very patiently. All right. We're going to open it to public comment. For everyone who wants to speak, we'll try to keep it to about 3 minutes before everyone has a chance to talk. Please state your name and your address so we can have them in the minutes. And we'll make it through, but given the time, I don't know that we'll be able to loop if you have more than one. So try to get everything you want to say in and let's go, okay? I think I'm going to describe our fun if you just want to raise your hands and we can sort of work our way through. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm Harold French. I live at 118 West Road. My property directly abuts this project. I've seen the project. I have absolutely no objections to it or the number of units that are going to be out there. I kind of prefer it to a commercial development of that area. I'd rather see homes. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. French.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? All right. I guess public comment was shorter than anticipated. All right, so that gives us time to talk.
Brendan?
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Kevin Bragg, 364 Baptist Road.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make an observation and maybe a recommendation, and that is there's a section where in the response I was reading through some of the documents about the kind of meeting the requirements of the things that were listed for the project. And one of them had to do with the farmstead aesthetic. And quite honestly, with my background, I see very little in what was pictured here that fit what the intent was behind the farmstead aesthetic. I'm not saying it's not a nice looking development, but I don't think that that part of the fulfilling of what the intent of this whole new way of looking at zoning, I really don't see how what's basically a 21st century idea of having your garage at the very front and the entryway to the house buried in the shadows behind gables that make no sense. And here we have a chance for probably the first walkable neighborhood, and there's no sidewalks and there's no front porches for people to communicate on. I just think that there could be a lot more done, even though it's not workforce. I think that's really what we're talking about here, workforce type housing, that makes it more of a community that is different. When I looked at all the other ones that were, Amherst and some of the other places, they still had that sense of it could be anywhere. And I think the opportunity here in fitting in with the community and community acceptance would go a long way with something that really did work outside the box. They don't all have to be the same. Couldn't they be a large house with an extension or a barn that had 2 single units in it or something? I don't know. I just think there could be a lot more done. And that would probably go a long ways to creating something that was truly unique and in the end probably of a higher value to the community and the residents that are going to be there. So I'm not against the project. I just think we could do a lot more on that part of the way things are. I think there's a reason for the board to kind of uphold, what does it look and feel like in the end, and how does that relate to the rest of the community? So I just throw that out.
Thank you, Mr. Mack.
Can I? Oh, sorry. I just wanted to reference something he said.
Yeah, we can start back up there.
Beth Blair on Hackleboro Road. I did just have a question, something like the smaller triangle that's across the road or any of the open space. Could that be used by the residents if they indeed have an association? Could they decide to put a park there or a playground? Is that still considered open space if it's used for the recreation of the neighborhood?
Well,
I don't believe so. I think that I believe if the condo wants to have like a tennis court, it can't be on the space. They have to have their own dedicated space for residential amenities like swimming pools, tennis courts, parking, trash.
And those spaces are not currently included in this plan, is that correct? So how does that affect any of your calculations if this is a bunch of, or you're just assuming that each individual house acts individually with their own trash, their own play sets, their own, correct?
Barbecue, garden.
Okay, but there was mention of having an association that would have to take care of the open area. So who forms that association? Is that part of the development of the property, or once the people are there, are they left to their own to develop an association?
they need to provide HOA documents that protect the open space and then detail what their HOA.
If you look at 6.4I and then, where is it, 2 and 3, the designated open space shall be permanently deeded to an owners association. So basically they
Right, that was my question.
They have to form as part of this, and so I think the proposal is a condominium, and there's limited common area and sort of their individual lots, and then they have this common area that they all collectively own through their owners association and have that responsibility to maintain.
And the onus of
There'll be a condominium bylaws or whatever they're called as part of their ultimate.
Well, that, I guess, is my further question, is the onus of forming the association on just the people living there or the developers?
Beforehand.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And it's a little more complicated because of the commercial properties, which are also condos.
Yeah.
Any other public comment, and then after that, I think we've got to get to
Can I quickly
units of
reference what Kevin was saying? So I agree with you. That was one of my first points of the design review. I think it's improved, but I will say I was, you didn't show it in the presentation, but I was driving through Litchfield and just this past weekend, and I drove and I was like, oh, those are really out of place. And then I was like, wait, those look really familiar, and they pretty much look identical to what you submitted. Same colors, same style, different layout, but so I would agree that there is more work to be done there. But I don't think we're getting to design tonight. But I just wanted to say that I did drive past one of your developments, and it stuck out like a sore thumb. It just did.
So make sure I don't see any hands.
Oh wait, there's someone up here.
Oh, good catch. Is it Greg? I can't read the last name from this distance.
Sorry, my name is Caitlin Payne. I live at 215 Intervale Road. My apologies if I missed this at the beginning of the meeting, but upon listening to the information on the impact study, I did not hear anything mentioned about the impact on the school district. And I know that they were provided with information by the superintendent.
Yes, thank you for the comment. So we do have the letter. It is going to be, I'm not going to read it out loud into the record, but it is going to be entered into the record. We have, I said it at the beginning, a letter from Central New Hampshire Regional Planning Commission and a letter from Michael Tercy, Superintendent of Shaker Regional. So both of those are part of the record.
May I address the school issue for a moment? This was not persuasive to me, the Michael Tercy letter about having to move a grade or displacing art and music or hiring another teacher. That didn't make much sense to me. If I'm assuming, let's say 34 units, and I'm like, maybe half of them will have kids or something, and current statistics are a little bit less than 2 kids per parental household or whatever, so that makes 34 kids. There's like, I think 10% go to private schools, so subtract a couple, and you have down to 30 kids or something like that, and they're all going to be in different grades, so it's not like they're all in 5th grade. And so, like, the impact seems much more diffuse to me than this this letter suggests.
Yes, I hear you in, because the 7 with shared facilities, I thought this suggests the development could add about 9 school children to the school system. Shaker Regional School has seen lower but stable enrollment over the past 4 years, but has seen an increase in 2024.
Oh, I didn't see any numbers.
reading
Superintendents.
You're in a different document.
Oh, okay. That I didn't
So,
see that number.
this just seemed like it was, the one from Michael Tercey seemed like it overstated the impact of law.
And to your point, and I think our role here is looking at the cluster neighborhood standards. The impact that gets a regional impact notice is different than what we're looking at for our standards. So the potential for regional impact is understanding is a butter, but it doesn't change what the requirements are. Does that make sense?
It just means we have to know.
Right. And so, to the extent that it's relevant to one of the cluster neighborhood requirements that we go through, we consider it. But it's
I don't know where it's relevant.
yeah, we're no longer at the point of is there impact, the impact of a butter standard. Okay. So, Lisa.
Hi, Lisa Carlson, Morrill Road. I'd like some clarification about public water supply wells and a question about shared septic units. I don't understand how the map of the drawings of a potential layout allows for space for septic. I need to understand that better. Can anybody provide that explanation? Where's the space for septic?
So that's on my list. I think I'm trying to move through orderly just to make sure I don't miss anything.
Is that another meeting?
I think it's going to have to be addressed in another meeting. What I am hoping to be able to give them a little bit more clarification before we leave is how to finish calculating that open space and what are the units. And then they're going to come back with a new plan, and then we'll be able to look at that more concrete plan to say, this lot, can it fit everything it needs to, and we can work our way through the plan. That way, does that make sense? I think that's your understanding as well. All right. So, our outstanding questions, we had sort of a discussion on how large of an area for open space. We had that small triangle, the larger triangle. And then how do we account for commercial units and residential units for a mixed use residential? And I think
I just have a basic question about commercial.
Just say your name.
Oh, Townsend Todd, Barnett Road. When you talk mixed use commercial and residential, is there a percentage that you can be commercial versus residential? If you're talking 30, 35 units, or 37, the magic number, you're squeezing out all the residential, but now you're trying to stuff in 5 acres of commercial. At what point are you turning a commercial property into a residential neighborhood? So is there a 60-40, 70-30? Is there anything in the provisions that sort of allocates a percentage or an intent of the mixed use?
I don't think so, and I think that was part of the problem and why the ordinance got amended, is that we had
the new ordinance says
commercial.
50%.
Okay. So for purposes of this, we have nothing in the ordinance.
So it has no play in determining the amount of units.
Okay.
Good question. Good question.
Beth between Southwest Road. Calvin's question brings up one for me. If we're in the old ordinance for some things, but it's the new ordinance that allows mixed use, how is that?
So I think
Am I misinterpreting something?
the old ordinance would have had to allow mixed use. My understanding is it did, it just didn't provide any
Okay, gotcha.
direction on how to handle that. Which was part of why design review was not very productive prior to all those missing questions. All right. Sorry, looking at the time over your head. So, we get to units. Any thoughts on units or any limitations or how that is addressed? There were some thoughts earlier. I think you had one at least.
So our baseline number is 32.
32, and then just by any density that we choose to grant under
Yeah.
those provisions. Yeah.
And they're looking for density bonus, space, open space,
And the community wall.
and community wide.
And so we can get that too, but 6.6, we've got a lot of flexibility there. It's entirely discretionary as to whether to award them. They pointed out 2 and are asking for 15%, which gets them, is that 5 additional, and it's 35 residential and 2 commercial.
I think they comply. I don't agree with how they comply, but I think
Well,
the
complying with step 1, we can still
Yeah.
choose not to grant a bonus, even though they need to. It is still discretionary. It's, for exemplary cluster neighborhood. Yeah. So before we get there, yes. So I tend to think, absent anything in the ordinance that limits it, that they can do this when there's larger amounts that are ultimately a unit for those commercial units. They've got that proposed retail unit to the north. They've got the proposed unit to the south. And they are talking about it as storage, but unless there is some sort of restriction, we don't actually have any control over what commercial use goes there. And then 35 units divided up as they did between duplex and single.
We don't have control. I'm sure I have so many notes in so many different places, but we did have intent for retail, and I understand that it's driven by the market, but this is also going to determine what the market wants there. Is this road that is private looking and not, there's no space for signage, there's no, I can't see like a small retail that would be supportive of the community doing well in a space like this, therefore the market's going to.
And I'll just add that we can always ask, we cannot necessarily compel
Right.
voluntary restrictions in terms of, types of commercial uses that are allowed and excluding some. So that
But it is in my consideration if they want bonuses, if this is exemplary.
Any disagreement then that a single commercial use can be a single use regardless of the amount, as long as they're complying with the open space requirements? There is not like a maximum that they can put into a single commercial unit or a single residential unit. Makes sense?
I'm not sure I understand your question, but if I restate your question to be this, so I just want to know, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 buildings, and the claim that that's a single unit, is that the question you're asking?
Yeah, can they have this larger commercial unit and then any, commercial use that is allowable on that lot can go there? And
Which
that
would have
use would dictate the
theoretically
amount
any
of
number of
buildings.
buildings.
Correct. So that's the question, is there sort of a limit there in terms of those units? I don't think the ordinance, as it existed, had limits. And maybe that's where we have to talk about
Do we have a
that.
definition for commercial use?
No.
That's a problem, we should fix that.
Great, Mr. Chair, this is obviously something that we've had a hard time with the whole time, is calculating. Again, it was pointed out correctly that the market will dictate what goes there. Hard for us to pre-design some non-build to suit use on this property, and then to determine what counts as a unit is nearly impossible at the beginning of this project. To tell you what will be there and how it should be. So
To me, this gets to the crux of my concern about this project, is that you've been very clear that commercial is gonna be phase 2. And, there's no assurance that, you know, Joe and Jane, commercial developer, can even put a commercial use here. You know, I have no assurance at all that this is even viable and for anybody. Never mind the particular use, but for anybody. And kicking the can down the road, which is I feel like, you know, that's what phase 2 is like. Someday there's going to be commercial, and you know, given that this is a commercial district and residential is sort of, you know, shoehorned into a commercial district. You know, I know we talked about this before. You know, I want some assurance that there's going to be a commercial use here, and you know, there should be another person sitting at your table saying, "I'm going to build a whatever," and until that happens, you know, not that I care too much about what the commercial use is, but that a commercial use is even viable. And I don't know enough about commercial usages and planning to know whether, you know, a lot this size, you know, configured on this road, so just like the way it is even viable for any commercial use. And so, you know, I want assurance that there's going to be commercial use here and here. Otherwise, this is not a commercial proposal at all.
Yeah, and I think based on our group's collective experience, I know I can think of a project I worked on permitting in Somersworth, for example. It's denser apartments in the front, and then in the back of that acreage is this storage unit because it's a lower density use. Something where you already built some access roads, it's easy enough for people to go. Maybe you go get you get your kayaks out for the summer, you put them back in for the winter, whatever, that type of thing. So in a spot where this is a little bit further removed from the exit, it makes it logical to have something that's a bit more passive and a bit less actively used, which is why, of course, we show the retail space up at the front. So the proof of concept is there, and that uses like this exist in places behind residential neighborhoods.
The proof of concept for storage units, which we already have a lot of and have problems with historically.
If I might.
Not a proof of concept for anything except storage units.
Doing not part of the development team. I think the assurance is partially baked into the approvals. You'd be approving a commercial lot. The market's ultimately going to dictate what comes back to you for site plan approval. And that's where you have more controls, right? You don't have to approve any site plan that's put in front of you. It's a commercial lot, commercial unit, that you'd have a second bite at the apple, so to speak. In terms of providing an answer as to whether or not there's any credible use commercially for that property, the market's going to ultimately dictate that. We're going to make it available to the market. The market's going to come back and say, oh, well, maybe it's not self-storage. Maybe it's a solar field. Maybe it's something none of us could possibly think of that comes up 5 years from now. But it's going to be there. And again, it's baked into the approvals. We won't, or nobody will be able to do anything different than a commercial use on that land. If you
Respectfully, I disagree with that. And the reason why is, let's say you made this commercial spot, you know, an odd shape, figure 8 or something, and no commercial user on the face of the earth will say, I can't build anything there. And so we can designate it commercial, but it's not actually usable as commercial. I want assurance that this actually can be used for a commercial. And I'm not prejudging what the use is. I don't care what it is. It can be a cement plant. I mean, that's a different issue, right?
On a flat 5 acre lot, you saw it today. Do you think there's no use?
I don't know. I don't know.
Well, we can't prove that to you.
Well, that's because you don't have the commercial.
So
that's not our obligation.
Everyone just trying to talk over each other.
Okay.
We can keep going, but Josh, you.
No.
Okay, so, yeah, Craig.
When we worked on this ordinance, the the point was to jumpstart commercial. It wasn't to provide a big opportunity for residential. It was saying, okay, we'll allow a few little bit of residential here and that, and get to jumpstart the commercial, and that it's part of the development, both things, commercial and residential, and they both have to happen.
And, well, I agree you can't give assurances, but you designed this in a specific way. You looked at a mixed-use spot and prioritized, in a commercial zone, prioritized residential, and this is very clearly secondary, both in your phasing, in your design. So you can't control the market, but you could have designed this up front and put residential back here, but you'd have fewer units, right? So that was intentional, and you can't have assurances on whether or not that's viable, but you designed it this way. And that's what we're reviewing, is the design of it.
I can tell you, I think a 5-acre lot in that area, flat, the way that it is viable for something. I could absolutely put self-storage there. I could absolutely put a solar field there. It would be viable.
Is this viable for commercial as well?
I would think it's viable.
So this was
well, in terms of, but I don't believe that there's a market there. And secondarily, you're dismissing the piece that's right on the main road that I think Sam talked about potentially being a coffee shop or some other retail use in the future. And that is, again, a viable, allowable use in the zone commercial. So it wasn't an afterthought. It was that there's one up front and there's one out back.
I'm sorry, I'll let Sam talk, and then I'll kind of focus on the board, because I'm trying to be conscious of the time.
Thank you. Maybe I can play middle ground here. So there's kind of two aspects of viable that we're kind of talking about here. There's the market viable, and there's can you physically build it, construct it on the lot. We showed you an example of storage units, and we showed you an example of a Starbucks concept. Does it make sense? And I purposely designed the stormwater to account for 80% impervious area, which is a very high number of impervious, to make sure the bases can accommodate that. So essentially anything less than 80% of the impervious area could fit there. Would it make the board more accepting of the viability of the lot if I provide additional kind of concept layouts of other uses that could potentially go there besides just storage units? And maybe there's a use that, just so I can demonstrate that this lot is a viable commercial piece for all different aspects, not just storage units. So same thing with the front, I could put a concept together that's retail or office space with the appropriate amount of parking, and then as long as I'm below my 80% impervious numbers, I'm within my assumptions. And would that give the board comfort in knowing that? And then the second part of that is we have to create condo documents, and in those condo documents, the board will review them and deem if they're acceptable, and in that we can restrict those lots. We will always be commercial on those boards. And then if we want to make for an exemplary cluster development, maybe there is some considerations of, well, we don't want to reduce potential uses. Maybe there's some consideration on that, especially when it comes to the bonus densities. Does that kind of sound like a reasonable plan forward to demonstrate what?
We'll discuss. All right, so hearing Megan and Brian and Josh, we are not going to be able to control what goes into a commercial unit, but at the same time, what is fully within our control is the density bonus. And we have a commercial zone and a proposal that would be almost entirely, I shouldn't say almost entirely, but like 35 out of 37 units at least proposed are residential. The voters of the town, at least after the fact, have shown their intent. They want the commercial zone to have 50% commercial, so real commercial. So while we can't get any assurance in terms of these two units, we can find that a mixed use residential and commercial that so heavily prioritizes residential and that doesn't have defined commercial uses where we can't actually evaluate how well they work together, that bonus density is not appropriate for a proposal like this. And so I think those are the two things that we can we're not gonna get that assurance on commercial.
Right, and that's what I was agreeing, they can't give us assurance, but what I'm saying is that if I'm looking for an exemplary design for mixed use that's prioritizing commercial, this is not exemplary to me.
And I tend to, I would say, we're not gonna get any assurance on these two things, and I do appreciate that they have proposed ideas for what could go there. We can't control that, but in the absence of having defined things and with this ratio of residential to commercial units, I would be disinclined to grant any density bonus looking at this proposal. We'll see what.
I want to go further. I want assurance. I want the commercial proposal at the table at the same time with some understanding that that's going to be, rather than, and phase 2 could be 35 years from now, and I don't think that's what the purpose of the commercial zone is. The purpose of the commercial zone is to have commercial uses, and this makes it so that, maybe someday we'll have commercial use, but there's no, this is supposed to be commercial with an additive of residential, and this is, like Megan said, precisely the opposite, and I want to see your commercial proposal at the table.
I don't think that's what we get in subdivision. Even the 2 residential unit that was next to my house that we heard they could choose to never build that residential building.
Well, but that's
we create units for a purpose, and then someone can use that unit. Normal subdivision, you create lots, and a person can use that lot, but we don't.
But you can't have a phase development until phase 1 is complete, then you start phase 2.
Yeah, phase 1 should be the commercial, and then phase 2 should be the residential. I'd be okay with that. Assure me that there's going to be commercial development here, either by having a person at the table, or a memorandum of understanding, or reverse the phases or something. But this is a commercial space, and maybe something. Yes, it would help if there were, other types of uses. Demonstrate that there's some other kinds of uses that are available other than a storage, facility. But that would help. But no one's ever going to come there. I want to see the commercial use before I see the residential, because this is a commercial zone, and we don't have a lot of commercial zones in Canterbury. We have this, and there's one on 106, and there's a little bit on the other side of exit 18. And that's it. And so we're by kicking the can down the road, calling it phase 2, and we never get any commercial, we've essentially undone exactly our ordinance says this is commercial, and we've approved something that will never be commercial, and I don't think that's allowed by our zoning ordinance. This is supposed to be commercial, and until there's commercial, I think this is kind of a non-starter.
May I ask a question? Right now we're talking about density bonus, right? And that, I'll say, overlaps with this commercial question. And part of what I heard was that what's shown right now, maybe partially because there's not as much commercial as you'd like to see, that it's not compelling enough for density bonuses. Could you talk a little bit about what would be compelling for bonuses if there were a little more commercial? Would you be more inclined to grant even more density bonus? Because there are other ways we can potentially sort of parcel this up, and I hear what you're saying. We can certainly make an effort to go out and pre-sell access to the commercial spaces. That's going to depend on a lot of the feedback we get from you, and whether it makes sense, the ultimate density makes sense for adding more commercial, and compelling people to maybe do something sooner than they normally would.
Well, I think coupling the density bonus with this is like a way to achieve the middle ground. Mm-hmm. But before you get there, I think this proposal is essentially rezoning. I mean, I know that's the legal word, but we're rezoning this. If there's no assurance of commercial, we're rezoning this to a residential zone when our zoning ordinance and the town and all that has clearly made this commercial first, and this is a commercial zone. We are rezoning, and I think that's unlawful. I think that's outside the spirit of the ordinance. And so, me personally, I can't vote for this until there's a assurance of commercial use, however configured or whatever type. That's really my business. But it is my business to make sure that this is commercial. And by calling it phase 2 and making it someday in the future, I think we're essentially rezoning this, and you can't do that.
Yeah,
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Rich?
I want to echo, if I can add my 2 cents here, I want to echo what Josh and Greg have been saying, is that the commercial zones in Canterbury are very narrow and very limited, and we don't have much of it. And to try to jumpstart that zone, there was some addition of mixed use and the residential to spur the development of the commercial zones. And echoing Josh's sentiment, it seems like phase 1 was first proposed, and then the storage in the back was added, and when there was pushback, it seemed that all of a sudden there appeared the commercial development at the front of the property, but that was after the fact. And it seems like more of an appeasement for the plan, but again, like Josh said, I'd like to see phase 1 be the front commercial with the residential at the very least. Otherwise, it's defeating the purpose of the mixed use and the combined residential areas. That's all.
Thank you, Rich. Megan?
The addition of the commercial in the front was during a design review, which is the intent of the design review. You're coming to ask us about design, so that's fair. I want to answer your, I'm sorry, Mark.
Errol.
Harold?
Errol.
Errol. I wanted to answer your question. This came up, and we can go through the minutes for the sake of time, but I did list out things that the town wants to see in terms of commercial. So for me, this is a design question. This is essentially saying, like, if you're designing a house and you're like, here's our bedroom, we're gonna have a bathroom on it. We're gonna put the bed in this tiny bathroom area, and we're gonna put the toilet right in the middle of the room. That's what this looks like. So for me, it's we can't guarantee what's gonna go in there, but you can certainly design to incentivize certain things. So for me, it would be designing to incentivize those things that I listed. If you wanna look back in the minutes, I think it was the first or second meeting of what the town wants in terms of retail and, elder care, those sorts of things.
And those sorts of things would compel you to feel more comfortable with the density bonus.
For me, yes, I can speak for
Yeah, I mean, in terms of density and final decision, we're gonna have to see, whatever the plan is, and the board will have. I mean, we can give you, and I think it's helpful for each of us to give you our inclination.
I appreciate it.
I think, and to Josh and Rich's point, yeah, it is, how do I put this? We're stuck with an unfortunate aspect of the old ordinance that allowed this, which seems contrary to what the voters of town wanted in this area. But we can't hold that against the applicant, so we can't control how they use units outside of what they use, right? So any commercial use, that part's outside our control. I don't think we can force them to come forward with a particular applicant for those. But at the same time, we can say, and I think we have good information from the town as to what they would like to see, and what, when they created this zone, is a significant amount of commercial. And short of a significant amount of commercial use in this area, in the commercial zone, we can choose within our power, and we have that full discretion to not find this to be an exemplary plan. So that's where I see it. It's not that we can compel them to build a particular thing. Subdivision. We create units. The unit is limited to whether it's commercial or residential or whatever, and then someone puts it in. If they get this plan and they have 2 commercial units and they can't find someone to put theirs, well then those lots just sit there and they have every incentive in the world after this to go find someone to build some commercial use there. And so I would hope that that ultimately compels something in these areas.
I think they have no incentive at all to install commercial use back there. You know, the thing's operating, everyone's happy.
I mean,
and then there's gonna be people living here who are going to show up and be opposed to a commercial use. And I do think we have the authority to not say what kind of commercial use, but we have the authority to insist that there is a commercial use. And I think I want to insist that there's commercial use.
They'd be stuck with 2 commercial lots paying joint ownership fees on a condominium with all of those other residential owners, but at least. Yeah.
And the condominium documents would speak to them being commercial use.
So, Kim, I think you've heard a number of our different opinions in terms of what the various board members would like to see. I think if we could just wrap up that one piece on open space so we don't get a plan that raises an issue down the road. I heard a number of people say that, and I forget, I apologize, Kenny, which board members, that larger area that could be open space, it's only bisected by a road, it could be usable. Is that the general sense of the whole board? Can we say that's something that is that, certainly not the tiny triangle, which is, not going to be usable by any real amount of people compared to the vast majority of this 18 acres.
I think it was 4 to 3 that you could not include the big triangle, because I felt like I was in the minority on it.
And we're potentially going to work on a design change that might just indicate.
Right. So, in terms of just your sense, maybe we'll just give a sense, because obviously we'll have to see the final plan. And analyze open space and how the ordinance addresses it. Scott, do you have a sense that can or cannot be included? Something that is a large area like that is only separated by a road.
So my sense is it can.
Okay. Megan?
Cannot.
I tend to think it cannot, but I think I'm sort of more open to see what the final plan would look like. And this doesn't have to be your final, we're trying to give them a sense that they can have a little bit more certainty when they come back to the plan to look at.
I'm a little bit inclined to say that it can, provided that it is, wooded, otherwise untouched, that kind of thing. But I'm very on the fence about that.
Josh?
I think it's currently configured, it feels like open space.
All right. Rich, if you're still there. Okay. So we're sort of split on that point, and we'll see what the final one. So use your best judgment. If you can make it a little bigger, maybe you get more people. Again, certainly my mind's not made up until we see a final plan and what it looks like as a whole.
Yeah, and then I guess the last kind of question was to confirm, is that commercial lot, is that considered to be 1 unit, or is that?
Yeah, I
think that's all dependent on this other thing we were talking about.
Right. Well, but I mean, just the question, and when we talked about that earlier.
I think if only one commercial entity is allowed to use that space, then we have to consider it as 1 unit, because there's no other conceivable.
But I don't know enough about commercial development. Someone might say, well, this is good for me, but I want to have 2 different businesses there, and that's 2 units. I have no idea, and that's why that's the part of the mystery of this. That
can you just note that in the minutes? Yeah.
That we don't know what the commercial user is not at the table, and so whether this is, like I say, I think it's probably usable, but I don't really know. And so I don't think you can decide how many units it is until you have something more developed.
Hypothetical out there. If this was a commercial cluster subdivision, and there were 10 commercial lots, what would be the board's opinion on that?
Each lot would require 1 acre minimum.
Yeah.
That's not the question. So if it was a commercial cluster subdivision, and the lot could be 0.5 acres or 5 acres, would that be one commercial unit, or would that be 0.5 commercial units, or would that be 5 commercial units? I'm just saying like a standard commercial subdivision. And I would, if it's one commercial lot, it's one unit. And then if it's just a subdivision, the board isn't gonna ask for a site plan on each individual lot.
That's the way we've been doing it. And there's a family in town who does that. But I don't know if it's so hypothetical.
Yeah, I'm just trying to simplify the question.
Those high bay units are, each one is a unit.
Each one's a unit, I think.
Each one's a unit and each one's allowed to, yeah.
And they come in here every time that one of the businesses is sold, they come in, sort of take a pro forma vote.
Yeah, so that sounds like one, and I don't know what site you're talking about, but that sounds like you have, what I've always referred to as like industrial flex, but you have a unit that is able to be sold off as one unit in a building. I'm saying one person owns that entire lot that has the structure on it.
So that would be like if you have a rental property with 4 apartments in it, you're saying that's one unit?
I'm saying when it comes to commercial site planning, if I am doing a site plan, it's on one lot, and that's it.
So, and if it's 4 different office buildings, it's still one?
It's one person owns it. It's one unit. It's one lot, one owner.
And again, I think the challenge in all of this is that your ordinance doesn't really give us the direction on where we need to go from this.
I really think the basic problem is that you don't have a commercial person in your team.
I've designed
We don't have
several
a dedicated commercial person on the team, but I think Sam has been involved in commercial projects. I think Keith has done commercial, I've done commercial, but that's not our main side.
But this is subdivision, and this is, it's, as I see it, it's effectively a law. But whoever is going to then come propose a commercial use has to come in for site plan review, and that is the point where we are making sure that it fits the requirements. And so, in terms of one units, they can come with any viable commercial plan, that they can have a site plan that will fit those lot dimensions and those access requirements.
Here's the question. So if this is 5 acres and we're saying it's one unit, but the commercial person can then do whatever they want to it and make it 5 different commercial things, then each one of those commercial things should be using 1 acre. But they use the acre allotment over here.
You essentially describe a further subdivision.
Well,
we don't know what, we don't know whether any commercial use in the world can fit in this box, or what subset of potential uses can fit in this box. We don't know that. And
I can show you what can fit in that box.
Yeah, I think that's the best we can do right now, because I don't think that there's anything in this ordinance or in the RSAs that tells me we have to have pre-marketed and basically signed up someone for
I think
this.
it's our ordinance requires that because this is a commercial.
But the commercial zone doesn't require that there's an active use in every zone, otherwise the gas station across the street would have to be opened by town ordinance.
No, but by calling it phase 2, that may never happen, then I feel like I'm rezoning in opposition to what the town has clearly said is commercial. And rezoning I can't do. And so I feel like I am turning a commercial, without some assurance, I'm turning a commercial zone into a residential zone. And I feel like, I think that's just unlawful. So I'm allowed to do that.
With respect, I think we have heard these comments, and there is maybe not more that we can do tonight, particularly at this time. We need to at least open the next hearing so that we can fund the date. I mean, maybe didn't get every answer. I think we have moved through a lot of those.
Yeah.
In terms of timing for moving to continue, and you had spoken about potentially wanting to go to the Conservation Commission to talk about the whatever your next plan is, the more ponds and access to the pump.
The use of the open space.
Those two in particular, those open spaces. Is that still your intent? So would it make sense to like 2 months or a month and a half, or I don't know what the schedule is for the Conservation Commission?
I'm not sure.
Okay, I can find out.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
Should we not do the same thing with whether or not this is one unit or two? Just, we're not voting on it, but can we go through and give?
We can do that piece too. That's a good point.
Everything else.
Good point. We'll do that after. Let's check on the Conservation
So
Commission.
the next Conservation Commission meeting is August 14th.
So when we're pushing deadlines this far, we need to make sure we're not past the statutory
Well,
requirement.
unless they're agreeing and it's part of it, we want to have this discussion. And so at 8:14, do you anticipate that you would be able to make 8:14 so that we're looking at some meeting after 8:14? Or do you think that, based on what you heard here?
Yeah, we can make that 8:14 meeting and then come back before you on the next one. We might not have
That's fair.
perfect changes to the plans, but at least we're keeping the application moving forward. Hopefully we'll have the other studies.
So let's plan that, so that's as soon as at least, and if you end up needing more time and that one doesn't work out, you can come.
Was that 8:14 here or?
No, I think that, Chief Cal was saying,
Yeah, 8:14 is Conservation Commission, 8:26 is Planning Board.
Yes.
okay.
So you'll be back here on this issue on August 26th?
Presumably with a modified plan in some respects, and we'll talk to the Concom at least about that piece. To make his point, and before we go, hey, Josh, please jump in if I'm describing this differently, because I'm trying to describe two pieces. I think one view was a commercial unit. It is basically a unit that has to have a commercial use. Someone would have to come back for site plan review, but we can't sort of require or need a defined plan for that now. And the other version is that for it to be a commercial unit, you need to have a proposal for the actual use on that commercial space.
I feel like you said the same thing to me.
I thought I said different. So version one is you don't have to define the exact commercial use of a unit. It is just a unit that is one owner in the future comes back with a site plan review. Second view is right now for this cluster subdivision, you need sort of defined use for those units so that the board can evaluate whether it's a unit. Does that
the second
one
one
your perspective?
further, I don't think we can decide how many units it is until we have the commercial use defined. Whether it's one or two, I don't know. It depends upon, or three, I don't know what.
I'll try one more. So one view, they're just defining units for future commercial use, and we are not talking about what's in them right now in the subdivision. And second view is you need to define what commercial use or uses is in that spot for purposes of even determining whether it's a unit.
Right, I think you are making sense when I said that doesn't make sense.
Oh.
The second option doesn't make any sense.
Oh, well, and that's where we can each have our own, say, but I think those are the two that we're at least discussing, or at least one person believes in each of them. So, apologies for putting you on the spot first, as always, Scott.
Happy to go
So
first.
what are your...
Each is a unit in my view. I think to do otherwise is asking something impossible.
Meaning just, right now, it's a
Yep.
unit, but we don't have to talk about the... Okay.
Correct, 1 and 2.
Megan?
Yes, currently it's 2 units.
Okay. Greg?
It's 2 units.
I don't understand when you say 1 unit or 2. What's the it we're talking?
No, it's not,
Meaning, I think the answer is 2 units with undefined future commercial use. That's how I see it.
So the space on the south, we're calling that 2 units?
Sorry, we're calling that 1 unit, and at some future point, a unit owner will come in with a proposal, but that we are not right now in the subdivision defining that. So I think that's what
I feel like
you're saying. You disagree, I think.
Can you answer the question? I think.
Can I fairly say that your position earlier was you would like to see in the subdivision the use that is going to be in a unit?
I don't need to the use, I need assurance that that the commercial use is actually happening in a timely manner, or else I would, and if I don't, then I feel like I'm rezoning and that's illegal.
And Rich, do you have a sense on that?
I agree both sides. One unit, yes. But again, I would like to see, as Josh said, assurances. For example, the front commercial area, an assurance that the front commercial area is going to be phase 1 with the residential phase 1A or phase 2. It can be in conjunction, but I think by starting with the housing, it's circumventing the commercial zoning. So interpret that how you want, but
all right, thank you, Rich. And I guess the last thing I'll just add is obviously you're free to propose any conditions you want in terms of types of commercial uses or any other limitations if you think that helps the overall plan.
Do we have
with that,
a new date?
8/26. I'd like a motion to continue to this application to 8/26.
Motion to continue.
Second.
All second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye. Aye. That's not my question. My question is, we have approved. If the application is complete, there are a certain number of days by which you must make a decision. And if we have extended past that certain number of days, they have to give us.
Yeah, I think we did in requesting to meet the contracts. That's how I interpret it.
We're also only 30 days in.
Yeah, if you're 90. Yeah.
All right.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. Sorry, it's a long night. Next, hearing on 75 Intervale Road, and my apologies. Sorry you had to wait.
Folks, could you take that outside?
Yes, Sam, do you mind just stepping outside to great.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
What I think, given that it's what I'd like to be able to do is complete this meeting. I think it was pretty straightforward, and then we can find a date to continue it that is not the same date as 114 West Road. These applicants for 75. Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, that's all right.
Coming up.
Good. Interesting information, either way.
Where was I? I lost my the one that makes that
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Just gonna give it a minute for everyone to filter out, so there's not too much.
I forgot copies or anything.
This was here.
I know.
You're just outside?
Check and see if he's still there.
Yeah, sure.
It is, thank you, yeah, appreciate it. There's a picture of that. Yeah. So either him or his dad. Submitted.
We just had to pull it out like that. So.
Here.
This one's
out of the way.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah. Oops, that one is.
This is the
That's-
114 West.
Oh, and Megan's got it.
Yeah, Megan has
No, it's, so the zoning.
It'll give it to me, but I don't know that. I have the focus. Yeah.
So we have a problem, but not that. That's where we're at, so I'm gonna go through it and I'll present that. Thank you very much.
Do it. All right, and we still have, Rich, are you good for a little, I mean, we can see how far we can get on this, and maybe, I think it's definitely more straightforward for the last one. You guys good, if you want to try to hear the application, to the extent we can, see if it's longer, if we get to a stopping point. If we hit any snags, I think it's less likely.
Yeah.
But, okay. Sound good? So we'll let you start the application, let us know what the proposal is, what you've provided, and do our best.
Could you start with your name?
Yep, my name is Jonathan Crowdis from Beltane.
Oh, am I supposed to go? Rick Zeller, 77 Intervale. I think I've lost something else.
Good enough.
Ian Zeller,
14.
77 Intervale.
Benjamin Matat, 75 Intervale.
What is this? All right.
Ready?
Floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm here to present this for the Matatops. Zeller. So it's a bad lot. I'll just show you real quick. About 14 and 15. So they're 15 and 20 acres, pretty big lots on Intervale Road. So the proposal is a lot line adjustment and then a minor subdivision. So what would happen is parcel A, the yellow lines are the existing lines right now. So that's the line between 15 and 14. The adjustment would take parcel A from 14, give it to 15, and also parcel B would also go to 15.
Okay, so the parcel is that like back lot, or back acreage, I should say, and then that triangle along Intervale as well at the top.
Right here.
Okay.
And then, out of that resulting lot 15 would come a new lot 15-1 right here so this frontage isn't changing, it's the same point. It would be 300 feet and 300 feet roughly, a little over. So the original intent was an equal swap of area. These two pieces together would equal what's coming out of 15, so 15 wouldn't change. So that's the proposal. What we submitted and what you all have seen was discovered at 4 o'clock today that it doesn't meet zoning. We mistakenly did not take out this area from the minimum lot size. So we were trying to make this 3.1 and you need to take out wetland, to make the minimum buildable area 3 acres. And we missed this. So since that time at 4 o'clock, I hurriedly had to recalculate this. So what you're looking at, the orange line is what we submitted. The blue line is what we had to do at 4 o'clock today. Same intent, it's just we had to do that to make this work, and I added the lot calculations.
Try to repeat it back and see if I understand this. you basically, that new lot, you added the difference between the blue line and the orange line so that there was more non-wetlands there to meet the minimum acre.
Right.
Okay.
Which was to make up for the building setback area.
If I get the big picture, which I might be missing, two neighbors, and if you swap some land, you can squeeze a third lot out of it that's buildable.
Right, that's, yeah.
Right.
Pretty normal.
So yeah, this is
About 35 units.
So yeah, and then so this is the existing driveway. It's a lot 15, and that'll stay with an easement to get to it. It'll be a common easement. The building area will be up here for this lot. So we have yet to dig the test pit and go to state subdivision. So we haven't done that yet. But
Is there a house on 14?
yeah, it's probably off the map. It's up here. Yeah, both are developed. And
14 is 17 and a half acres as a starting point. Right?
14 is 20 right now.
That's
New, sorry.
It'll end up with 17.
17 and a half.
And what I explained about what we missed doesn't affect the two adjustments or lot 14. It's just the resulting lot 15 is slightly smaller than
And that driveway easement looks like it cuts straight across the middle of the new lot.
Mhm.
Does that make it so that the potential residence is like kind of weird, like, someone's driving by your house all the time?
It's a common driveway. Yeah, I mean, it's just.
Oh, it's a common driveway.
Yeah, so they take it to wherever their driveway to their house comes off.
And Joshua, you can't tell us there's a lower level.
Oh, right, there's.
Significant.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so there's a topography. So this is a flat spot to build in. So, yeah, there would be common driveway and utilities.
Oh, so the new residence would be right next to the driveway, which makes sense.
It's up above.
It's significant, the driveway's like this, and it's way above, so you can't even see it.
Maybe I'm just missing. What's for that, just what's in blue, so that new lot that's being created, what's the proposed acreage?
Here it is.
Yep.
What's this one? Oh, I see it. There's a line. 3.116 acres. You're going to put 17 acres, 15 acres, and the 3 acre lot.
Yeah, and that meets the minimum lot size.
Or
For whatever help it might be, these are
Oh, cool.
11 by 17s and what.
That was very helpful.
I'm sorry, we had to make this change.
And I suggest you check the ordinance requirement on easement width.
Okay.
I think we did, right?
What was,
In the regs. It's in the regs. I don't.
I've already done.
Who owns which one?
That's not going to Other than these are creating odd-sized, odd-shaped lots, I don't have any objection to it, although they're already odd-shaped, so there's no getting around that.
So the new lot, to your question. Sorry. Will end up being 3.4, 3.38.
Okay. Oh, I see. 3.1 is the old one, so now it's.
Yeah, I left that on there just to illustrate my change, so you see what I submitted and what I changed
And then
to.
Because it's under 5, you go to state subdivision approval to make sure you can fit septic for the new lot.
Yeah.
So the easement will have bearings and distances on it. Those aren't on yet, but.
There is something that's bugging me.
I know it's like the worst time to say that.
Is there a benefit, like basically what we're doing is changing our lot so that it's this now, and his lot so that it's this now. Do we have to even worry about having a house lot? Because when we subdivide, we may change that lot anyway.
So I don't understand.
It's up to you.
See what? So we may, when we decide whether we're going to build on it or sell it, we don't know. We might include something back here as part of it, and like we don't know how we're gonna
As long as it meets the minimum lot size.
Right. So if we don't know how we're gonna redo it anyway, is there a benefit to having it be like having to go through all this rigmarole rather than just saying we're doing an adjustment of the town?
So the difference is you'd have to come in twice. So if you do bolt down, which is the proposal, you leave, there's a subdivided lot, you record this, some future owner comes in. If you just did a lot line adjustment, someone else has to come back and do a subdivision in the future.
So either way, we end up up here.
Yeah, to get a new lot, there has to be that subdivision.
Unless you
No, I'm
want
gonna
to
say,
take tax on it.
right, unless we kept it as is, if we decided to sell it, or sell the other one, or whatever, unless we kept it as, if we didn't keep it as it is, we'd have to come, but if we do keep it as it is, we wouldn't.
I don't understand the question. If you get a subdivision and you create a new lot, the person who chooses to build a house doesn't come back for planning board review, they get a building permit, you go through those other applications. If you,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Will you have a quorum to vote if I leave? Sorry, I mean, yeah.
won't, wait.
You will have 4 people in.
We'll have 4, yes. Oh no, Rich is still there.
Rich is
still there.
Okay, I'm so sorry.
No problem.
You have
Trying
nothing
to
to
conversation
apologize
as
for,
well.
the service you're doing.
You have some of your own, because it's a long meeting, so,
So the only benefit is not having to do this twice, which we might have to anyway.
If you're gonna increase that lot.
If we're gonna change that lot.
So are you good proceeding with the lot lines and subdivision? Is the most important question that I have, because if yes, we can
I know, I should.
look at and have an answer on that. If you are not or want time to think about it, like we can continue the application, you can come back. But if you're good with this proposal, we can.
Or if you want to just do the lot line back and do the subdivision some other day.
Well, as with neighbors, I worry that they.
Tax-wise, are we done with one
Yeah,
lot?
so we're me as a board are good to hear the application. You just gotta commit.
You don't have long.
And this is much simpler than the other one because we're just looking at lot sizes and making sure that there's access to 3 lots and that you need the lot dimensions and area.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of it more as 2 lots. But
if you approve it, you're not binding them to do anything. They don't have to do anything.
But if they don't, as long as they don't record anything.
Right. I mean, as we walk out of this room, there's nothing written in stone that.
So you still have to come
You
back.
just have approval to do this if you want to do it.
Good enough for me. I'm looking at White Ruin Rural, so it's 3 acres. As I said, they got it up to 3.4, so you've got that front area and well excluded, so that meets the acreage requirement. You had a building envelope that I saw, and then the other one said existing, so you've got that building envelope.
Yeah.
What is it?
Side.
And that's, where am I, rural, 250 by 300, and that's 250 by 300 shown there, and that's the triangle that they're adding. So I don't see an issue with this, and obviously they have to get that state approval to make sure the septic works for the proposed lot.
So if we are going, we should check that Hey, Rich, do you remember the right-of-way width requirement?
50, I think.
50 feet.
So I think you have 30 on there, right?
Going this way or.
Access and utility easement.
Where's
It
that?
says 30 feet right here.
Yeah, where's the requirement for?
Where is it, Rich? I think it's in the regs,
It's in the LDR,
right? Land
the
development regs.
ones that we did this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to make that right away 10 feet wider on each side.
Let's make sure we can find out the right requirements. So, subdivision specifications. Submission requirements, is that under section 6?
Rich, can you help, can you point me to the section that's in? No.
Sorry, I don't have my stuff with me. Sorry.
No, we'd have to like search it.
Let me see if I can find it at 6. Access, minor subdivision. Road improvements. Doesn't have a.
Now, I think it's gonna be in one of the minor things, either a minor or one of the other lot line adjustments, or it's gonna be in one of those other conditions.
Maybe 8.6.
Thank you.
Streets. Wait, I looked at minor subdivision, I don't see it. There's 50-foot staked interviews before any clearing for the right of way. In 8.6.
Given the topography, is a 50-foot right away a problem?
I mean, in here it could be.
Well, I mean, the driveway's already there, I mean.
Oh, right, so.
So, I think whoever made this 30 feet made it what they thought they needed.
Yeah.
Based on the driveway being.
Originally, I had that at 50, and me and Tim talked that it would benefit the person putting the house on that flat area up top if it wasn't so wide.
Oh, yeah, there's a 20-foot.
Well, assuming the road didn't, or at least the right of way doesn't have to be necessarily the.
The right of way already exists, right?
But that's my question.
It's the driveway does, yes.
But I mean, this house over here is driving across the.
Well, I own it all right now.
Right.
I own it all right now.
Yeah, I mean, so the question for
It's not a
us
house up
is
on-
this a requirement, and this is why I'm having trouble finding, is this a requirement for constructing a street as opposed to where there is like an existing driveway, private road?
Well, if it's in the regs, they can ask to waive it, we can vote to waive it, because it's already installed.
And I made it smaller so it would benefit somebody putting a house up there.
So it was 50 feet?
I had it, when Tim first did it, I had it set to 50 feet. And then I told him he could bring it down, just because it wouldn't be impeding on the person putting the house up top there. And that whole top flat area is like a field.
Like a football field.
Yes. My problem is I just want to be able to put eyes on where the requirement we're talking about. 50 foot.
I think it's something you're gonna have to search in the.
Your eyes must be swimming at this point.
I'm looking for it right now.
You're trying to search it?
I'm trying to find it.
Search the document. Look for right of way.
Yeah.
Look for the word 50.
Easement.
Might be digits.
Oh, wait. Every highway right of way shall be at least.
Well, it's not that.
Is it
Yeah, this is
Dead
not-
End Street?
No, this is.
Right, so this is not like a dedicated
It's not a
an
highway.
accepted street or highway. Okay, so I tend to think it's fine if that's the requirement that we're looking at.
Michelle's got something that you might know.
Kevin does.
Well, we just look at 8.20.
8.2.
That's for streets. That's for streets.
Yeah, so I think that's, in my mind at least, that's when we're telling them
There
that
is something,
you
there
are
is a-
improving the land use, you are creating a new. Okay.
See, because it is a shared driveway, it's different than it's just a driveway.
It's a shared driveway of two. So let me put it this way, it's not a zoning ordinance requirement, it is in the regs. Does anyone of the 5 of us have any concerns with the 30-foot driveway servicing 2 lots? The existing one and the proposed new one?
No.
Rich?
No.
Okay.
No.
So suggest you ask us to waive it.
Would you please waive the
Can you waive
50?
that 50 foot?
Well, there was one, to the extent it's there, it's on streets, so it's not in the zoning ordinance at the very least. So we just talked, frontage is good, lot size is good, they're gonna go get the, so I'm inclined to say we can approve it now, and obviously the condition is that they would need to ultimately obtain that approval from the state for septic.
Okay.
And then a driveway permit.
Well, it's already,
Well,
it's an existing driveway.
Is that Cinderell's?
No, there's no new driveway.
Well, it's
It's an existing.
expanded use of an existing, but either way, we say all applicable and move on.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Good. Can I get a motion to approve subject to obtaining all applicable local and state permits?
So moved. Seconded.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. And just to be clear on that motion, it is the as changed with the plan that you submitted tonight with that change. So there's,
With the blue line.
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for
A whole lot easier than otherwise, huh?
Yeah, I'll take a walk on it just a
Everyone agrees.
Where is the agenda?
Ricky,
Once
Once you get that.
Oh, yeah, is that yeah.
Okay, so actually I do have one new piece of business, and this is maybe a little frustrating that we got to, but I don't know if we can finish this tonight. I will send, or someone, maybe I'll ask Cal to do it. Ken notified me that there is a new bill that was signed into law about ADUs, and it may be applicable to the Fifield conditional use permit for an ADU that we saw.
Correct.
I had an initial concern. I think, as I understood that bill, it was you can't require greater things than you can for a normal residential house, but it doesn't mean that we don't have a CUP in place. It just means that we can't require like greater setbacks or greater parking or those kind of things. So what I'd like you to, and we can circulate this for the rest of the board for the next one, is think about, is our CUP application or requirement just totally preempted, or does it still exist and fit within that law, and we just can't require more than for a single family house? So we'll circulate that to the board, take a look at it, take a look at the statute, and then in 2 weeks, I think they'll be back. And maybe the start
And
of
this
their
is for the
application.
proposal to the Shaker and Bastis?
No, this is the ADU.
And Shaker and
Yes,
Bastis?
yeah. And so at the start, when we continue, we'll have to have that conversation of.
Oh, it's Steve Highfield. Shaker and Baptist is for down. Steve Highfield's is up closer to Lands.
Okay.
So,
Sorry.
no problem. So, Cal, would it be possible for you to send sort of, and it can just be, I think you can forward Ken's initial email, maybe not my response, so there's not really a discussion among us, but Ken's initial concern, and just maybe in the subject, say the question for the board when we start is, to what extent our ordinance has been preempted and is a CUP permit still required?
So I know it's after 10 o'clock, but here's a potential issue, is what if the Fifields show up tomorrow morning in Center Lake asking for a permit? What are we gonna tell them?
I you know, it's only a 2-week difference. We tell them they have to come back, they have a pending application. Right now we have an ordinance, so until the planning board, I think, says this doesn't apply, it's not uncommon sometimes to say, you can say the building permit is, you need to go to the planning board, you go to the planning board says, no, you don't need to come to us, it's been preempted. So I would hope that a 2 weeks
That would
wait
be the
isn't gonna be
easiest
that
way
them
to
gonna
do it.
start an appeal.
I
Wait
guess
2
that's up
weeks.
to them.
Yeah,
Well, if they really insist on tomorrow, that'd be a problem, but hopefully.
right.
More about it.
Yeah.
So that's when we would have had it anyway, and that's when we can sort of have I think that's an appropriate board decision, not a single person decision, so. All right.
But if it's preempted, Brendan, wouldn't just a letter suffice?
Not even that problem.
If that requirement sort of preempts our ordinance, what ends up happening is they just go get a building permit. So that's sort of what Ken is saying and what the
Right,
applicant
so-
says want.
So instead of them, I mean, it seems like it would be more immediate if a letter was sent to them saying that the technicalities have been preempted, so you don't need to come back in and you can go ahead and do what you want to do now.
Right, but what I'm saying is, I think the board should look at that statute, because I don't think that's exactly what that statute says. It sort of talks about how much versus how little, and it changes some of the room requirements, and either way, we can
I
take
misunderstood.
Yeah, so we can.
I misunderstood you.
In 2 weeks, we can all take a look, and I'll have more time to really sit down and read it, and then we can say at the start, take a vote. We either do or don't think you still need a CUP. If they do, we move forward. If we don't, then they're good.
I'm just noticing, I think the woman that was sitting in the chair right in front
Oh,
of me.
Lucy Ann Zeller left her purse.
Oh, sorry.
The night of
Elected
people
voting
leaving
person.
persons, yeah.
Oh, I think
Still out there?
phone number.
I have it.
Okay.
She might need the.
I love that.
I make a motion to adjourn. I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.